Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We're continuing the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 7, Chapter 9, Prahlad pacifies the Lord with prayers. Tasmai bhavanaya shirastanavam hibibrad Vedat druhavati balam arukaita pakyao Hatvanayat shritiganam charajastamaschya Satvam tava priyatamam tanumam munanti. My dear Lord, when you appeared as Hayagriva with the head of a horse, you killed two demons known as Madhu and Kaitaba, who were full of the modes, passion, and ignorance. Then you delivered the whole Vedic knowledge to Lord Brahma. For this reason, all the great saints accept your forms as transcendental, untinged by material qualities. Purport: the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental form is always ready to give protection to his devotees. As mentioned herein, the Lord, in the form of Hayagriva, killed two demons named Madhu and Kaitaba when they attacked Lord Brahma. Modern demons think that there was no life in the beginning of creation, but from Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand that the first living creature created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead was Lord Brahma, who was full of Vedic understanding. Unfortunately, those entrusted with distributing Vedic knowledge, such as the devotees engaged in spreading Krishna consciousness, may sometimes be attacked by demons, but they must rest assured that demoniac attacks will not be able to harm them, for the Lord is always prepared to give them protection. The Vedas provide the knowledge by which we can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vedaishta sarve ramameva ahameva vedyaha. The devotees of the Lord are always ready to spread knowledge by which one may understand the Lord through Krishna consciousness. But the demons, being unable to understand the Supreme Lord, are full of ignorance and passion. Thus the Lord, whose form is transcendental, is always ready to kill the demons. By culturing the mode of goodness, one can understand the position of the transcendental Lord and how the Lord is always prepared to remove all obstacles on the path of understanding him. By culturing the mode of goodness, one can understand the position of the transcendental Lord and know how the Lord is always prepared to remove all obstacles on the path of understanding him. So let's hear some Praman verses that will support this statement. By culturing the mode of goodness, one can understand the position of the transcendental Lord and how the Lord is always prepared to remove all obstacles on the path of understanding him. Just the first part of the sentence. Praman. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Puman Upavrita. Next line. Bhagavan Vasudevo. Still, we're on this one. What page? Sattvam Vishuddham. What is it? 217. And you got to grab the book too, actually. Fourth canto. Page 217. Let's do it together. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Pumanupavritaha Sattve Chitasmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Yadhoksajo Me Namasa Vadhiyate. Again, I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. And here's the purport. The living entity is constitutionally pure. Asango hyayam purushaha. In the Vedic literature it is said that the soul is always pure and uncontaminated by material attachment. The identification of the body with the soul is due to misunderstanding. Due to what? As soon as one is fully Krishna conscious, it is to be understood that one is in his pure original constitutional position. This state of existence is called Shuddha Sattva, which means that it is transcendental to the material qualities. Since this Shuddha Sattva's existence is under the direct action of the internal potency, under which potency? In this state, the activities of material consciousness stop. For example, when iron is put into fire, it becomes warm, and when red hot, although it is iron, it acts like fire. Similarly, when copper is surcharged with electricity, its action as copper stops. It acts as electricity. Bhagavad Gita 14:26 also confirms that anyone who engages in unadulterated devotional service to the Lord is at once elevated to the position of pure Brahman. Mam chayo vyabhicharena. No, repeat. Mam chayo vyabhicharena. Bhakti yogena sevate. Sagunan samyatitaitan. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Therefore, Shuddha Sattva, as described in this verse, is the transcendental position which is technically called Vasudeva. Technically called what? Vasudeva is also the name of the person from whom Krishna appears. This verse explains that the pure state is called Vasudeva because in that state, Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed without any covering. To execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service. Must follow what? Verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaischaran atmavasher vadeyatma prasadam adhikachyati. To execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations. What if one doesn't follow the rules and regulations? What's the verse? Yashastra vidimutsrija vartate kamakarata nasa siddhim avapnoti nasukam na param gatim shuti smiti paranadi panchatriki vidimbina aikantiki harer bhaktir upatayaiva kalpate. If one doesn't follow the rules, regulations, shruti, smriti, pancharatriki, vidhi, etc., then one simply becomes a disturbance to devotional society. To execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service without desire to gain material profit by fruit of activities or mental speculation. Verse, Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karmanyanavratam anakulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttama. In pure devotional service, one simply serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a matter of duty, without reason and without being impeded by material conditions. That is called Shuddha Sattva or Vasudeva, because in that stage, the Supreme Person Krishna is revealed in the heart of the devotee. Srila Jiva Goswami has very nicely described this Vasudeva or Shuddha Sattva in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. Where's the Bhagavat Sandarbha? Put it on the list. We need the Bhagavat Sandarbha. We should get all the Sandarbhas here as soon as possible. You can order them from the, You can order them from Rasi Bihari Lal. Who could put the order? Okay, put the order Rasi Bihari Lal as fast as you can. And let's get that whole set. We should have it up in the library, the whole Sandarbha. Srila Jiva Goswami has nicely described this Vasudeva or Shuddha Sattva in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. He explains that Ashto Tara Shata, 108, is added to the name of the spiritual master to indicate one who is situated in Shuddha Sattva, or in the transcendental state of Vasudeva. The word Vasudeva is also used for other purposes. For example, Vasudeva also means one who is everywhere or all-pervading. Verse about how the Lord's all-pervading. Verse about how Lord Nrsimhan is all-pervading. Bahira nishingo radaye nishingo nrsimhabading sharanam prapadye. The sun is also called Vasudeva Shabditam, The word Vasudeva may be utilized for different purposes, but whatever purpose we adopt, Vasudeva means the all-pervading or localized Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita 7:19, it is also stated, Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Factual realization is to understand Vasudeva. To understand who? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, and surrender unto Him. Vasudeva is the ground wherein Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed. When one is free from the contamination of material nature and is situated in pure Krishna consciousness, or in the Vasudeva state, Vasudeva, the Supreme Person, is revealed. This state is also called Kaivalya, which means pure consciousness. Jnanam Satvikam Kaivalyam. When one is situated in pure transcendental knowledge, one is situated in Kaivalya. Therefore, Vasudeva also means Kaivalya, a word which is generally used by impersonalists. Impersonal Kaivalya is not the last stage of realization, but in Krishna consciousness, Kaivalya, when one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one is successful. In that pure state, by hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., because of the development of knowledge of the science of Krishna, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these activities are under the guidance of the internal energy of the Lord. A verse that tells how devotional service is under the internal energy of the Lord. Mahatmanas mam partha daivim prakritimashita bhajantyananya manaso gyatva bhutadamavyayam. A verse that says by hearing and chanting, one develops one's knowledge of the science of Krishna. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sangasya jayate. The action of the internal potency is also described in this verse as a pavrataha, free from any covering. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His name, form, quality, His paraphernalia, etc., being transcendental or beyond material nature, it is not possible to understand any one of them with the materialistic senses. A verse that says you can't understand the Lord by materialistic senses. Atashi Krishna namadi nabhaved grayam indriye sevamukhi jivado swayameva spuratyada. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His name, His form, His quality, His paraphernalia, etc., being transcendental, are beyond material nature, it is not possible to understand any one of them with the materialistic senses. When the senses are purified by the discharge of pure devotional service, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktiruchite, the pure senses can see Krishna without covering. Now one may inquire that since factually the devotee has the same material existential body, how is it possible that the same materialistic eyes become purified by devotional service? The example is stated by Lord Chaitanya, is that devotional service cleanses the mirror of the mind. Chetotharpanamarjanam bhavamahatavagni nirvaparam shreyakairava chandrika vitaranam vidyavadu jivanam Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipanam purnam ritaswaranam sarvatmasnapanam param vijayate Shri Krishna sankirtanam. The example as stated by Lord Chaitanya is that devotional service cleanses the mirror of the mind. In a clean mirror, one can see one's face distinctly. Similarly, simply by cleaning the mirror of the mind, one can have a clear conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8:8, Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partanu chintayan. By executing one's prescribed duties in devotional service, cetasa nanyagamina, or simply by hearing about God and chanting about Him, if one's mind is always engaged in chanting and hearing and is not allowed to go elsewhere, one can realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As confirmed by Lord Chaitanya, by the Bhakti Yoga process, beginning from hearing and chanting, one can cleanse the heart and the mind, and thus one can clearly see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A verse that says one can see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or requesting to see the face of the Personality of Godhead. Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam bukam tattvam pushana parvenu satyadharmaya drishtaye. Anything more about the lotus face of the Lord? Go right ahead. Oh, good one. Lord Shiva said that since his heart was always filled with the conception of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of the Supreme Lord's presence within his mind and heart, he was always offering obeisances under the Supreme Godhead. In other words, Lord Shiva is always in trance, samadhi. This samadhi is not under the control of the devotee. This samadhi is not under the control of the devotee. This samadhi is not under the control of the... It is under the control of Vasudeva, for the entire internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead acts under his order. Of course, the material energy also acts by his order, but his direct will is specifically executed through the spiritual energy. Thus, by his spiritual energy, he reveals himself. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 4:6, Sambhavam Yatmamayaya. Atmamayaya means internal potency. By his sweet will, he reveals himself by his internal potency, being satisfied by the transcendental loving service of the devotee. The devotee never commands, "My dear Lord, please come here so that I can see you." It is not the position of the devotee to command the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come before him or to dance before him. There are many so-called devotees who command the Lord to come before them dancing. The Lord, however, is not subject to anyone's command. But if he is satisfied by one's pure devotional activities, he reveals himself. Therefore, a meaningful word in this verse is adhoksaja, for it indicates that the activities of our material senses will fail to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by the attempt of one's speculative mind. But if one desires, he can subdue all the material activities of his senses, and the Lord, by manifesting his spiritual energy, can reveal himself to the pure devotee. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself to the pure devotee, the devotee has no other duty than to offer him respectful obeisances. The Absolute Truth reveals himself to the devotee in his form. He is not formless. Vasudeva is not formless. For it is stated in this verse that as soon as the Lord reveals himself, the devotee offers his obeisances. Obeisances are offered to a person, not to anything impersonal. One should not accept the Mayavadi interpretation that Vasudeva is impersonal. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, prapadyate, one surrenders. One surrenders to a person, not to impersonal non-duality. Whenever there is a question of surrendering or offering obeisances, there must be an object of surrender or obeisances. Thus the Lord, whose form is transcendental, is always ready to kill the demons. By culturing the mode of goodness, one can understand the position of the transcendental Lord. Verse: Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadi Yadhe Tatra Pumana Pavrataha. Next. Satvecha Tasmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Yadhoksaje Me Namasa Vidhiyate. In summary, whenever the Lord incarnates, he appears in his original transcendental form, as the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 4:7. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srajamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of your religion, at that time I descend myself. It is simply foolish to think of the Lord as being originally impersonal but accepting a material body when he appears as a personal incarnation. Whenever the Lord appears, he appears in his original transcendental form, which is spiritual and blissful. Which is what? But unintelligent men, such as the Mayavadis, cannot understand the transcendental form of the Lord, and therefore the Lord chastises them by saying, Avajananti mam buddha manashim tanumashritam. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. Whenever the Lord appears, whether as a fish, a tortoise, a hog, or any other form, one should understand that he maintains his transcendental position, and that his only business, as stated here, is hutva, to kill the demons. Is what? Hutva. The Lord appears in order to protect the devotees and kill the demons. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chatuskritam. Since the demons are always ready to oppose Vedic civilization, they are sure to be killed by the transcendental form of the Lord. Text 38. Itam nritirya grishideva chashavatar lokam vibhava yasihansa jagapratipan dharman mahapurusha pasyugana vrittam chanakala yarababastriyugota sattvam. In this way, my Lord, you appear in various incarnations as a human being, an animal, a great saint, a demigod, a fish, or a tortoise, thus maintaining the entire creation in different planetary systems and killing the demoniac principles. According to the age, O my Lord, you protect the principles of religion. In the age of Kali, however, you do not assert yourself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore you are known as Tri-Yuga, or the Lord who appears in 3 yugas. Purport. Who quoted this verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Yes. Who? Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? I don't think so. I think somebody arguing against Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. No, Gopinath Patanayak was put upon the Changa. But you're close. Gopinath Acharya. When he was telling the Lord, they said that the Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's disciples said, this can't be God. Lord Chaitanya can't be God. He's Tri-Yuga. He doesn't appear in Kali Yuga. There's no incarnation in Kali Yuga. And they quoted this verse that he's the covered incarnation. Or was it Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya who quoted this to show that they didn't appear, that he doesn't appear? Is that? Let's confirm. As the Lord appeared just to maintain Lord Brahma from the attack of Madhu and Kaitava. Channa avatar. Yeah. Yeah. So that makes a case for it. You have it? That was fast. The Bhattacharya said, we are just having a... The Bhattacharya said, we are just having a discussion among friends and considering the points described in the scriptures. Do not become angry. I am simply speaking on the strength of Shastras. Don't take any offense. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a great saint, uncommon devotee, but we cannot accept him as an incarnation of Lord Vishnu because according to the Shastra, there's no incarnation in this age of Kali. Another name for Lord Vishnu is Tri-Yuga because there is no incarnation of Lord Vishnu in Kali Yuga. Therefore, this is the verdict of the revealed scriptures. Purport, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is known as Tri-Yuga, which means that he is manifest in 3 yugas. However, this means that in the age of Kali, the Lord appears not directly but in disguise. This is confirmed by Srimad Bhagavatam 7.938. Itam nritirya grishideva jashavatara lokam vibhavayasi hamsi jagat pratipan dharman mahapurusha pas yugana vrittam chanakala yarababas triyugota sattvam. My Lord, you kill all the enemies of the world in your multifarious incarnations, in the families of men, animal, demigods, rishis, aquatics, and so on. Thus you illuminate the worlds with transcendental knowledge. In the age of Kali, O Mahapurush, you sometimes appear in a covered incarnation. Therefore, you are known as Triyuga, one who appears in only 3 yugas. Srila Sridhar Swami has also verified that Lord Vishnu appears in the age of Kali, but does not act as he does in other ages. Lord Vishnu incarnates for 2 purposes. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam. That is, he comes to engage in pastimes with his devotees and to annihilate the demons. These purposes are visible in the Satya, Treta, and Dwapara yugas, but in Kali Yuga, the Lord appears disguised. He does not directly kill demons and give protection to the faithful, because the Lord is not directly perceived in Kali Yuga, but is directly known in the other 3 yugas. His name is Triyuga. Shuniya acharya kahe tuki hoy mane shastragya karina tui kara abhimane. Upon hearing this, Gopinath Acharya became very unhappy. He said to the Bhattacharya, you consider yourself the knower of all Vedic scripture. Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata are the 2 most important Vedic scriptures, but you have paid no attention to their statements. In Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, it is said that the Lord appears directly, but you say that in this age there is no manifestation or incarnation of Lord Vishnu. In this age of Kali, there is no Leela avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he is known as Triyuga. That is one of his holy names. Gopinath Acharya continued, there is certainly an incarnation in every age, and as such an incarnation is called the Yuga avatar, and such an incarnation is called the Yuga avatar. But your heart has become so hardened by logic and argument that you cannot consider all these facts. In the past, your son has had bodies. Asan varnas taryo yasya granato nu yugam tanu shuko raktistata pita idanim krishnatam gata. In the past, your son has had bodies of 3 different colors, according to the age. These colors were white, red, and yellow. In this age, Dwapara Yuga, he has accepted a blackish body. Spoken by? This verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:8-13 was spoken by Garga Muni when he was performing the rituals at Lord Krishna's name-giving ceremony. He states that the incarnations of the Lord in other ages have been white, red, and yellow. This yellow color refers to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose bodily complexion was yellowish. This confirms that in past Kali Yugas, the Lord also had incarnated in a body that was yellow in hue. It is understood that the Lord incarnates in different colors for the different yugas, Satya, Trita, Dvapara, and Kali. Accepting the color of Pita, as well as other characteristics, the Lord incarnated as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the verdict of all the Vedic authorities. 102. In the age of Kali, as well as in Dwapara Yuga, the people offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by various mantras and observe the regulative principles of the supplementary Vedic literatures. Now please hear of this from me. In this age of Kali, Krishnavarnam Tusha Krishnam Sangopangashtra Parshadam Jagnai Sankirtana Prayer Yajantihi Sumeda Saha. In this age of Kali, those who are intelligent perform the congregational chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna. Worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appears in this age always describing the glories of Krishna. Glories of who? Krishna. This incarnation is yellowish in hue and is always associated with his plenary expansions, such as Nityananda Prabhu, and personal expansions, such as Gadadhar, as well as his devotees and associates, such as Swarup Damodar. And then Gopinath Acharya quotes, Suvarna Varna Hemango Varangashan Shanangadi Sanyasya Krishna Mashanto Nishta Shanti Purayanaha. The Lord in the incarnation of Gaurasundar has a golden complexion. Indeed, his entire body, which is very nicely constituted, is like molten gold. Sandalwood pulp is smeared all over his body. He will take the 4th order of spiritual life, sannyas, and will be very much self-controlled. He will be distinguished from Mayavadi sannyasis, and then he will be fixed in devotional service and will spread the Sankirtan movement. Gopinath Acharya then said, there is no need to quote so much evidence from the Shastra, for you are a very dry speculator. There is no need to sow seeds in barren land. When the Lord will be pleased with you, you will also understand these conclusions and will quote from the Shastras. The false arguments and philosophical word jugglery of your disciples are not faults of theirs. They have simply received the benediction of Mayavad philosophy. I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full of unlimited qualities and whose different potencies bring about agreement and disagreement between disputants. Thus, the illusory energy again and again covers the self-realization of both disputants. Very applicable to Kali Yuga, isn't it? In almost all cases, that's from 6.431. You want to check where that is? Just want to see where it falls in the scheme of things. In almost all cases, whatever learned Brahmins speak becomes accepted. Nothing is impossible for one who takes shelter of my illusory energy and speaks under her influence. After hearing this from Gopinath Acharya, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, first go to the place where Lord Chaitanya is staying and invite him here with his associates. Ask him on my account. So the verse, Itam Nittiryag Rishijeva Jashavatarar, is in the purport. (31) Yet Chaktayo. This is from the Hamsaguya prayers. Do you all know the Hamsaguya prayers? In the Hamsaguya prayers, this verse comes, Yet Chaktayo Vidatum Vadinam Bhai Vivada Sambada Bhavo Bhavanti Kurvanti Chaisham Buhur Atma Moham Tasmai Namo Nanta Gunaya Bhumne. Translation, let me offer my respectful obeisances to the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities. Acting from within the cores of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views, he causes them to forget their own souls while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Can you write this down where this verse comes from? I'd like to have this verse. 6.4.31, yeah. Thus he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. Purport. Dare we hear the purport? Yes. We dare to hear the purport. We're not afraid. We'll hear it. Since time immemorial, or since the creation of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls have formed various parties of philosophical speculation, but this is not true of the devotees. Non-devotees have different ideas of creation, maintenance, and annihilation, and therefore they are called vadis or prativadis, proponents and counter-proponents. They are called vadis and prativadis. Vadis, prativadis. Proponents and counter-proponents. It is understood from the statement of Mahabharata that there are many munis or speculators, Tarko, Pratishta, Shrutayo, Vibhinna, Nashavrashir, Yasamatam, Nabinnam. All speculators must disagree with other speculators, otherwise, why should there be so many opposing parties concerned with ascertaining the supreme cause? Philosophy means finding the ultimate cause. As Vedanta Sutra very reasonably says, Tato Brahmadignata, human life is meant for understanding the ultimate cause. Devotees accept that the ultimate cause is Krishna because this conclusion is supported by all Vedic literature and also by Krishna himself, who says, Aham sarvasya prabhavaha, I am the source of everything. Devotees have no problem understanding the ultimate cause of everything, but non-devotees must face many opposing elements because everyone who wants to be a prominent philosopher invents his own way. In India, there are many parties of philosophers, such as the Advaitavadis, Vaisesikas, Mimamsakas, Mayavadis, and Swabhavavadis, and each of them opposes others. Come on, I serve them by giving Prabhupada's books so they can, Vaisesika Das. Similarly, in the Western countries, there are many philosophers with different views of creation, life, maintenance, and annihilation. Thus, it is undoubtedly a fact that there are countless philosophers throughout the world, each of them contradicting the others. Now, one might ask why there are so many philosophers if the ultimate goal of philosophy is one. Undoubtedly, the ultimate cause is one, the Supreme Brahman. As Arjuna told Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 10:12, Param Brahma, Param Dhama, Parvitram Paramam Bhavam, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Marideva Majam Vibhum. You are the Supreme Brahman, the ultimate, the supreme abode and purifier, the absolute truth and the eternal divine person. You are the primal God, transcendental and original, and you are the unborn and all-pervading beauty. Non-devotee speculators, however, do not accept an ultimate cause, sarva karana karanam, because they are ignorant and bewildered concerning the soul and its activities, and though some of them have a vague idea of the soul, and even though some of them have a vague idea of the soul, many controversies arise, and the philosophical speculators can never reach a conclusion. All these speculators are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 16:19-20, Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradaman shripram ajasramashubhan asurasweva yonishu asurim yonamapana muna janmani janmani mama prapyaiva kauntyeya yitato yantyadamangatim. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. Attaining repeated birth among the species of demoniac life, such persons can never approach me. Gradually they sink down to the most abominable type of existence. Because of their envy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, non-devotees are born in demoniac families life after life. They are great offenders, and because of their offenses, the Supreme Lord keeps them always bewildered. Kurvanti chasam muhur atma moham. The Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, purposely keeps them in darkness. Atma moham. The great authority Parashara, the father of Vyasadeva, explains the Supreme Personality of Godhead thus. Jnana Shakti Balaishya Varya Virya Tejams Yasheshataha Bhagavat Chapta Vachchani Vina Heyar Gunadibihi. The demoniac speculators cannot understand the transcendental qualities, form, pastime, strength, knowledge, and opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which are all free from material contamination. Vina Heyar Gunadibihi. These speculators are envious of the existence of the Lord, Jagadahur Anishvaram. Their conclusion is that the entire cosmic manifestation has no controller. Jagat Ahur Anishvaram has no controller, but is just working naturally. Thus they are kept in constant darkness, birth after birth, and cannot understand the real cause of all causes. This is the reason why there are so many schools of philosophical speculation. Ignorance. I'm going to read the translation again. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, who possesses unlimited transcendental qualities, acting from within the cores of the hearts of all philosophers who propagate various views. He causes them to forget their own souls, while sometimes agreeing and sometimes disagreeing among themselves. Thus he creates within this material world a situation in which they are unable to come to a conclusion. I offer my obeisances unto him. You have Veda base, somebody? Aparigyana. Aparigyana. Mayo vivado. Hyastiti. Nastiti hyastiti. It's not in that book. Aparigyano mayo vivado. Similar verse. Aparigyana mayo vivado. Hyastiti. Nastiti vyastiti. So There's this discussion between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Gopinathacharya. You got it?
I found the STT, Vestiti.
You found it?
Yeah.
Which verse?
It's text number 32. Oops. It just went inside that. Text number 32. It's 6432.
6432.
32. Very next one.
Wow. Just see. Astiti nastiti chavastu nistadin. Find another verse with yastiti. Huh?
Found only one hit.
Aparigyana. Aparigyana. Find that. Mayo vivado. Being broadcast, we need the other microphone. Here.
So, Gopinath Acharya give the logic that Lord has come into with the different colors, Rakta, Pita, Tatha, Shuklo, Rakto, Tatha, Pito. So, Shuklo is white, Rakta is red. So, white and red, Lord has come before, and now is in, Pita is, we understand Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and black is Krishna. So what is white and red incarnations? I could not get it conclusively.
I haven't seen anybody get it conclusively. You got it? You found the verse. Okay, 11:22:34. Yeah, Hamsa Avatar. And really? Keep a record of all these verses, okay? Here's another verse. Atma parigyana-mayo vivado yastiti nastiti bhitarta nishta. 5 points for who found it? You found it. Okay. Shamalangi's got 5 points. Atma parigyana-mayo vivado yastiti nastiti bhitarta nishta. Vyartopi naivo parameta pungsam mata paravrita diyam swalokat. The speculative arguments of philosophers, this world is real, no it is not real, is based on incomplete knowledge of the Supreme Soul and is simply aimed at understanding material dualities. Although such argument is useless, persons who have turned their attention away from me, their own true self, are unable to give it up. Purport. If one doubts the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one will inevitably doubt the reality of the Lord's creation. Thus, without understanding Lord Krishna, mere argument and debate over the reality and non-reality of the material world are useless. The material world is really specifically because it emanates from the Supreme Reality, Lord Krishna. Without understanding the reality of Lord Krishna, one can never definitely ascertain the reality of his creation. One will always wonder if he is actually seeing something or merely thinking that he is seeing it. This kind of speculation can never be resolved without taking shelter of the Supreme Lord and is therefore useless. The devotees of the Lord are not inclined to such argument because they are factually advancing in spiritual enlightenment and are fully satisfied with their progressively more beautiful experience of Krishna consciousness. Atma aparigyana-mayo, based on lack of knowledge. Vivadaha. Okay. So the Bhattacharya and Gopinathacharya were having this debate. Gopinath Acharya says, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his... One cannot attain real knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by logical hypothesis and argument. Gopinath Acharya continued, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only by his mercy, not by guesswork or hypothesis. The Acharya continued, if one receives but a tiny bit of the Lord's favor by dint of devotional service, he can understand the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Atapite deva padambuja dvaya prashara leshanugrihite eva hi janati tatvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko picharam bachinban. My dear Lord, if one is favored by even a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate in order to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many years. Gopinath Acharya then addressed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, you are a great scholar and a teacher of many disciples. Indeed, there is no other scholar like you on earth. Nonetheless, because you are bereft of even a pinch of the Lord's mercy, you cannot understand him even though he is present in your home. It is not your fault. It is the verdict of the Scriptures. You cannot understand the Supreme Personality of God simply by scholarship. And then Prabhupada quotes in the purport, Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Namedhaya Nabahunashtena Yami Vaisha Vrinute Tena Labhyas Tashaisha Atma Vrinute Tanum Swam, which means, yes.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, the word we cannot understand Krishna from our mental speculation is called adokshaya.
Adokshaya.
That's what I heard from one
It means because it's the alphabet. From the beginning of the alphabet to the end of the adokshaya. A and Ja. And then it means that he's beyond even all the letters of the alphabet. To understand. You can say all those words, say all the syllables, but until Krishna reveals himself, you can't understand just within the alphabet. Prabhupada gives that. And then, Naisha Tarkena Matir Apineya. Don't be a Tarki. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya replied, my dear Gopinath Acharya, please speak with great care. What is the proof that you have received the mercy of the Lord? Gopinath Acharya replied, knowledge of the summum bonum, the absolute truth, is evidence of the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Gopinath Acharya continued, you have seen the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during his absorption in an ecstatic mood. Despite directly perceiving the symptoms of the Supreme Lord in the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you cannot understand him. This is commonly called illusion. A person influenced by the external energy is called Bahirmukh Jana, a mundane person, because despite his perception, he cannot understand the real substance. Hearing Gopinath Acharya say this, Sarvabhauma Acharya smiled and began to speak as follows. The Bhattacharya said, we are just having a discussion among friends and considering the points described in the Scriptures. Do not become angry. I am simply speaking on the strength of Shastras. Don't take any offense. Another name for the Lord in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is certainly a great uncommon devotee, but we cannot accept him as an incarnation of the Lord Vishnu because according to Shastras there's no incarnation in this age of Kali. Another name for Lord Vishnu is Tri Yuga because there is no incarnation of the Lord in Kali Yuga. Indeed, this is the verdict of the revealed Scriptures. Upon hearing this, Gopinath Acharya became very unhappy. He said to the Bhattacharya, you consider yourself the knower of all Vedic scriptures. Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata are the two most important Vedic scriptures, but you have paid no attention to their statements. Parigyana. Where were we? 7938. Where in the purport? That's where we are? Okay. Yes? Bahuna. So if one is Bahuna Shutena, greatly learned. Shutena. Oh, does much hearing.
Yeah, not even by much hearing.
Even not by much hearing. Yeah, it means that people, they go to all kinds of these, like a Bhagavat Saptaha or something. They'll sit for 7 days and they'll listen to some professional speak Bhagavatam, but then they don't get anything. Where was it? Gorkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. People used to come and try to be near him to get a little bit of notoriety, and they had a Bhagavat Saptaha right near where his Bhajan Kutir was. And he had, afterwards, after the Bhagavat Saptaha was over, he told his brahmachari servant, he was a disciple who used to come there and render service to him. He said, go cleanse that area with cow dung and water. And he said, but Maharaj, they just had Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days. How could it be any cleaner? And he said, I didn't hear any Srimad Bhagavatam. I heard rupee, rupee, rupee. In Kali Yuga, intelligent men worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is always accompanied by his associates such as Nityananda, Advaita, Gadadhar, and Srivas. The entire Krishna consciousness movement is based on the principles of the Sankirtan movement inaugurated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, one who tries to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of the Sankirtan movement knows everything perfectly. I need that quote. Could you make sure you write it down? He is Sumedas, a person with substantial intelligence. 39. Naitan manas tava katasa vikuntanata sampriyate durita tushna masadu tivram kama turam harshashuka bayanishanartam tasmin katam tabakatim vimrashamidhinaha. My dear Lord of the Vaikuntha planets, where there is no anxiety, my mind is extremely sinful and lusty. Being sometimes so-called happy and sometimes so-called distressed, my mind is full of lamentation and fear, and it always seeks more and more money. Thus, it has become most polluted and is never satisfied in topics concerning you. I am therefore most fallen and poor. In such a status of life, how shall I be able to discuss your activities? This is a verse quoted in Jiva Goswami's Bhagavat Sandarbha, because it's a problem. You know, he's saying that the mind just is so completely polluted and full of happiness, distress, that how am I going to hear? I mean, it's available, but the mind won't cooperate. So he gives some discussion about how important it is to work through the Anartha Nivritti stage. And this is an important aspect on this day of Nrsimhan Caturdasi, that we have to come to the stage of devotion, Prahlad Maharaj, completely pure without any expectation of reward, Jnana Karmanya Navritam, and the mind has to become fixed on Krishna. Purport. Here Prahlad Maharaj represents himself as a common man, although he actually has nothing to do with this material world. Prahlad is always situated in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual world, but on behalf of the fallen souls, he asks how, when his mind is always disturbed by material things, he can discuss the transcendental position of the Lord. The mind becomes sinful because we are always engaged in sinful activities. Anything not connected with Krishna consciousness should be understood to be sinful. Indeed, Krishna demands in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja Hang twang sarva pape pyo mukshayishami masuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. As soon as one surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, Krishna immediately relieves one of the reactions of sinful activities. Therefore, one who is not surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord should be understood to be sinful, foolish, degraded among men, and bereft of all real knowledge because of atheistic propensities. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:15. Namam duskritinu mudha prapadyante naradamaha mayaya pratyajnana asuram bhavamasvitaha. Therefore, so there's these four categories of people who don't accept Krishna. Shall we hear about them? And what about these four categories in context? They're not surrendered, so they can't understand. So, it is said in Bhagavad Gita that simply by surrendering oneself unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, one can surmount the stringent laws of material nature. At this point, a question arises. How is it that educated philosophers, scientists, businessmen, administrators, and all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the all-powerful personality of Godhead? Mukti, or liberation from the laws of material nature, is sought by the leaders of mankind in different ways and with great plans and perseverance for the great many years in births, for a great many years in births. But if that liberation is possible by simply surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord, then why don't these intelligent and hard-working leaders adopt this simple method? The Gita answers this question very frankly. Those really learned leaders of society like Brahma, Shiva, Kapila, and the Kumaras Manu, Vyas, Devala, Asita, Janak, Prahlad, Bali, and later on Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, Sri Chaitanya, and many others, who are faithful philosophers, politicians, educators, scientists, etc., surrender to the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the all-powerful authority. Those who are not actually philosophers, scientists, educators, administrators, etc., but who pose themselves as such for material gain, do not accept the plan or path of the Supreme Lord. They have no idea of God. They simply manufacture their own worldly plans and consequently complicate the problems of material existence in their vain attempts to solve them. Because material energy, nature, is so powerful, it can resist the unauthorized plans of the atheists and baffle the knowledge of planning commissions. The atheistic plan makers are described herein by the word dushkritinaha, or miscreants. Kriti means one who has performed meritorious work. The atheist plan maker is sometimes very intelligent and meritorious also, because any gigantic plan, good or bad, must take intelligence to execute. But because the atheist brain is improperly utilized in opposing the plan of the Supreme Lord, the atheistic plan maker is called dushkriti, which indicates that his intelligence and efforts are misdirected. In the Gita, it is clearly mentioned that material energy works fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. It has no independent authority. Going to work? Dimitri, you coming back later? Okay. Have a nice day. Good to see you. Hare Krishna. In the Gita, it is clearly mentioned that material energy works fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Where does it say that in the Bhagavad Gita? Maya dyakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagad parivartate. It has no independent authority. It works as the shadow moves in accordance with the movements of the object. But still, material energy is very powerful, and the atheist, due to his godless temperament, cannot know how it works, nor can he know the plan of the Supreme Lord. Under illusion and the modes of passion and ignorance, all his plans are baffled, as in the case of Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, whose plans were smashed to dust, although they were both materially learned as scientists, philosophers, administrators, and educators. These Duskritinas or miscreants are of 4 different patterns, as outlined below. 1. The Mudhas are those who are grossly foolish, like hard-working beasts of burden. They want to enjoy the fruits of their labor by themselves, and so do not want to part with them for the Supreme. The typical example of the beast of burden is the ass. This humble beast is made to work very hard by his master. The ass does not really know for whom he works so hard day and night. He remains satisfied by filling his stomach with a bundle of grass, sleeping for a little under fear of being beaten by his master, and satisfying his sex appetite at the risk of being repeatedly kicked by the opposite party. The ass sings poetry and philosophy sometimes, but this braying sound only disturbs others. This is the position of the foolish fruit of worker who does not know for whom he should work. He does not know that karma action is meant for yajna, sacrifice. Beautiful purports, aren't they? Not to yours. Most often, those who work very hard day and night to clear the burden of self-created duties say that they have no time to hear of the immortality of the living being. To such mudhas, material gains which are destructible are life's all in all. Despite the fact that the mudhas enjoy only a very small fraction of the fruit of labor, sometimes they spend sleepless days and nights for fruit of gain, and although they may have ulcers or indigestion, they are satisfied with practically no food. They are simply absorbed in working hard day and night for the benefit of illusory masters. Ignorant of their real master, the foolish workers waste their valuable time serving mammon. Serving mammon. It's a biblical term. Look it up in the dictionary. Unfortunately, they never surrender to the Supreme Master of all masters, nor do they take time to hear of him from the proper sources. The swine who eat the night soil do not care to accept sweetmeats made of sugar and ghee. Similarly, the foolish worker will untiringly continue to hear of the sense-enjoyable tidings of the flickering mundane world, but will have very little time to hear about the eternal living force that moves the material world. Got it? Mammon. Okay, mammon.
So mammon is from New Testament. It says riches or material wealth. And then it often has an initial capital letter. A personification of riches as an evil spirit or deity. That's mammon.
Anything more?
The origin is 1350 to 1400 in Middle English. The Latin and Greek mam, onus. Aramaic mammona means riches.
Means riches.
Yeah.
Mammon.
And synonyms are possessions, money, and gold.
Okay.
I was just thinking that it mentioned that it is written with a capital M. It starts with a capital M. And I was thinking like Maya also starts with
Maya,
capital M. Yeah.
mammon. Yeah, there's a John Milton, the famous poet, wrote Paradise Lost. It's a extensive poem, and it describes how the angels from heaven fall down from the spiritual world. They revolt against the Lord, and they have a fight. They're cast down from heaven. They fall into hell. And there in hell, the different characters in the poem are performing their different activities. But one of them, there's a lake of fire in hell. And one of them is very optimistic about it, and he starts a mining operation to take whatever gold might be there within the lake of fire. So even in that situation, this retrograde personality is thinking like how to get mammon. overcome by this. Atheist brain. Okay, mudas, braying sounds, mammon, practically no food, swine who eat the night soil. Huh? Ulcers. Absorbed in working day and night for the benefit of illusory masters. Really makes you think, huh?
Yeah. This one, Maharaj, about
Huh?
this.
A humble beast. He's a humble beast. What's that?
I was going to say that this one about not eating food is something that I saw practically at work. We had this huge meeting, and our biggest boss, so we broke for lunch, and he ordered lunch for himself, and it was a very tiny cup of just soup, and his secretary had ordered it before, I think, so it was cold also. And so it was pretty disgusting to taste. So you could see it like he was eating it, and there was disgust on his face. And that thought arose in my mind at that time. Like, he's earning millions and millions of dollars, and this is what he eats. I mean, I eat much better than
cup of
what
soup.
he does. Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah, millions of dollars, but how does it translate? And Prabhupada used to say that you can earn millions of dollars, but if your capacity is that you can only eat 4 chapatis, that's it. That's all you get anyway. All you can do, it's a thing. You're looking at the numbers come across the screen and go, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich. And then, here, have another chapati. No, I can't do it. And, somebody who's penniless, they might have a big appetite and be able to enjoy. It's like, yeah, give me 50 chapatis with ghee on them, fine. So who's enjoying more? The one looking at the numbers on the screen? Hare Krishna.
So Prabhuji, one more thing that I observed with my previous person whom I was working with is whenever there is a crisis, means some systems is not working, they say severity 1 case, so he'll come to my desk and he'll tell this is a problem. And then once he was saying that, you have to do like this, like that, this Mirabai, Bhajan, all those things don't work. You have to always be 24/7 available. And then what is the singing and all that? Because he somehow came to know that he's from Bengal, so he know about all this, always crying, Krishna, what and all this. And then one day, this P1 problem again happened, and he was like, he had stopped smoking for 6 months. And then his boss came to him and told that there is a P1 case and he is responsible for this. And then he'll come to me because I'm the next level. So and then he stopped smoking for 6 months, and then that day he smoked around like 3 packets or something like that. And in the evening, like after it was resolved, and I was talking to him, and he was saying that, see, I'm much better than you, because when P1 comes, at least I have some patience to understand what it is, but you go and smoke 3 packets of cigarette and kill yourself. Because I could stop it the way in which he said. But he was then trying to listen, but what they think is they are lowest, and they can think only when they smoke. And they don't even try to understand what is happening and what is the best way to keep themselves.
Yeah. Where's the tech department? The microphone went down. Battery gone? This is fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, ready for number 2? Yes. Dare we? All right. Fearlessly we go forward. Another class of Duskriti or miscreant is called the Naradama, or the lowest of mankind. Nara means human being, and Adama means the lowest. Out of 8,400,000 different species of living beings, there are 400,000 human species. Out of these, there are numerous lower forms of human life that are mostly uncivilized. The civilized human beings are those who have regulative principles of social, political, and religious life. Those who are socially and politically developed, but who have no religious principles, must be considered naradamas. Nor is religion without God religion, because the purpose of following religious principles is to know the supreme truth and man's relation with him. In the Gita, the personality of Godhead clearly states that there is no authority above him and that he is the supreme truth. The civilized form, verse, Mata paratanam nanyat kinchid asti niranjaya maisarvamidam protam sutri manigana iva. The civilized form of human life is meant for man's reviving the lost consciousness of his eternal relation with the supreme truth, the personality of God, Sri Krishna, who is all-powerful. Whoever loses this chance is classified as Naradama. We get information from revealed scriptures that when the baby is in the mother's womb, an extremely uncomfortable situation, he prays to God for deliverance and promises to worship him alone as soon as he gets out. To pray to God when he is in difficulty is a natural instinct in every living being because he is eternally related with God. But after his deliverance, the child forgets the difficulties of birth and forgets his deliverer also, being influenced by Maya, the illusory energy. It is the duty of the guardians of children to revive the divine consciousness dormant in them. The 10 processes of reformatory ceremonies, as enjoined in the Manusmriti, which is the guide to religious principles, are meant for reviving God consciousness in the system of Varnashrama. However, no process is strictly followed now in any part of the world, and therefore 99.9% of the population is Naradama. I think we lost SKP. He might have gone to get the Sandarbhas. When the whole population becomes Naradama, naturally all their so-called education is made null and void by the all-powerful energy of the physical nature. According to the standard of the Gita, a learned man is he who sees on equal terms the learned Brahmana, the dog, the cow, elephant, and dog-eater. That is the vision of the true devotee. Sri Nityananda Prabhu, who is the incarnation of Godhead as Divine Master, delivered the typical Naradamas, the brothers Jagai and Madai, and showed how the mercy of a real devotee is bestowed upon the lowest of mankind. So the Naradama, who is condemned by this personality of Godhead, can again revive his spiritual consciousness only by the mercy of a devotee. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in propagating the Bhagavat Dharma, or activities of the devotees, has recommended that people submissively hear the message of the personality of Godhead. The essence of this message is Bhagavad Gita. Is what? The lowest among human beings can be delivered by this submissive hearing process only. But unfortunately, they even refuse to give an oral reception to these messages, and what to speak of surrendering to the will of the Supreme Lord. Naradamas, or the lowest of mankind, willfully neglect the prime duty of human being. Two things in this last sentence that are extremely optimistic for those who are on the path of devotional service. One is that one must simply submit to the process of submissive hearing. Submit to submissive hearing. A little redundant. But point is, if we apply ourselves to hearing and we put aside the mind's speculations and simply hear without suspending disbelief and just hear from the Shastra, and just with a submissive attitude that I'm helpless and I'm hearing from the authority, and depending on that sound vibration to bring us to the perfectional stage, that will come naturally through the hearing process. That's one thing. And the other is that one may surrender to the will of the Lord. So he says, the lowest among human beings can be delivered by this submissive hearing process only, but unfortunately they even refuse to give an oral reception to these messages, and what to speak of surrendering to the will of the Supreme Lord. Naradamas, or the lowest of mankind, willfully neglect the prime duty of the human being. So if we willfully surrender to the Lord, we say to Krishna, my Lord, I'm yours, I surrender to you. then we'll also come to the perfectional stage. Add these two things together, surrender to the Supreme Lord and engage in submissive hearing, and you have the recipe for success in spiritual life. 3, the next class of Duskriti is called Maya Apritigyana, or those persons whose erudite knowledge has been nullified by the influence of illusory material energy. They are mostly very learned fellows, great philosophers, poets, literati, scientists, etc., but the illusory energy misguides them, and therefore they disobey the Supreme Lord. There are a great number of Maya Pratigyana at the present moment, even among the scholars of the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, in plain and simple language, it is stated that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is none equal to or greater than him. He is mentioned as the father of Brahma, the original father of all human beings. In fact, Sri Krishna is said to be not only the father of Brahma, but also the father of all species of life. He is the root of the impersonal Brahman and Paramatma. The super soul in every entity is his plenary portion. He is the fountainhead of everything, and everyone is advised to surrender unto his lotus feet. Wow. He's the fountainhead of everything. There, that super soul's there within our heart. That's profound. He is the fountainhead of everything, and everyone is advised to surrender unto his lotus feet. Despite all these clear statements, the Maya Pratigyana deride the personality of the Supreme Lord and consider him merely another human being. They do not know that the blessed form of human life is designed after the eternal and transcendental feature of the Lord. All the unauthorized interpretations of the Gita by the class of Maya Pratigyana outside the purview of the Parampara system are so many stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual understanding. The deluded interpreters do not surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, nor do they teach others to follow this principle. What do you think about these Maya Pratygyanas? Symptomized by the fact that they may be very learned, even in the Bhagavad Gita, but their knowledge is nullified by the fact that they reject God. Interesting, isn't it? What is it? Intelligent fools. Where does that come from? It's a common term. Intelligent fools? Or you just coined it? Intelligent fools. Himanshu?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Prabhuji, I also wanted to ask if you can enlighten each of these categories. What should be our strategy in the category specific to bring them in Krishna consciousness? Some of them may be envious, but some of them can come. So
okay. Namam duskritinu mudha prapadyante naradama. Okay, so there's the mudha. The mudha, you have to give him prasadam. Namam duskritinu mudha prapadyante naradama. The lowest among mankind. That means people who have no guidance from the Shastra, right? Won't take any guidance. Them you should give prasadam. Naradama. Maya Pratigyana. Yeah, prasadam. And then the last one? Asuram Bhavamashrita. Prasadam. Give Mahaprasad. You know, because I've seen that. I saw once Keshav Bharati Maharaj, when he was in Dallas, this one professor took a liking to him. She was very bright, PhD, and she was coming regularly to hear from him. But it was at the peril of her marriage, because her husband and her two daughters, they were all, you know, from a very academically based family and very, you know, scholarly, and they were aghast that she could be going to the Hare Krishna temple and that she had, you know, attached herself to some Hare Krishna. And, you know, they were... So anyway, this was going on for some time, and then it happened that the the devotees, some of the devotee women, were holding these cooking classes. And this professor was going to some of them, and her daughters had to go pick her up from there. And so one time they came, and she hadn't come out yet, so they had to go to the door, and they said, "Oh, come in, come in, come in." And they went in, and they were so touched just by the atmosphere, by the loving nature of these devotee women, and also they took some prasad. And afterwards they changed. They became, we like those guys, And then gradually, things, the heart starts to change, and the receptivity changes. The appreciating capacity becomes enhanced by that kind of association. Usually it's not by, a particular technique of preaching, but by the warmth of the devotee. They feel something. They feel something that they see in the person, that the person actually is very real, that they care. There's a quality about devotees who are feeling satisfied in Krishna consciousness they don't see elsewhere. And it's sort of it's something that they pick up from the countenance of the person, and from their demeanor, and from the way they're treated by that person, gently, kind of. And then if they take prasadam it's so powerful that it starts to change their heart cells in their brain and everything like that by taking prasad. Yeah. Is that microphone still working, or is it dead? Let's get the other microphone.
It just appears to me that this third category of Maya, Parita, Jnana, I think they are the most tough to handle. I mean, after, we were talking, so I was thinking, because the other three seem like at least more simple, but this Jnani person, he has a lot of, points and knowledge, and he's so adamant in he can always, prove others wrong and prove himself correct. So I was thinking that they're the most difficult to handle, probably.
Wasn't Bhattacharya Sarvabhauma was like that? He was erudite scholar. And then when he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gopinath Acharya said, "You can't understand this is God, because basically it was a Maya Pritigyana. His knowledge was stolen, even though he was so learned." But what did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do? He didn't try to force it. He just waited. He sat there and he cooperated with Sarvabhauma. And he listened for 7 days to his commentary, which Bhattacharya was trying to give as a way to help him in his sannyas. And after 7 days, the Bhattacharya said, "Don't you have any questions?" Usually, students ask something, or they say something, or something. He said, "You haven't said a word. You haven't asked one question. You don't understand what I'm saying? And you don't understand the Vedanta Sutra?" And he said, "I understand the Vedanta Sutra. Your explanation's like a cloud covering it over." And then they got into some discussion. Then Mahaprabhu, through his philosophy, because he explained the Atmarama verse, and also his discussion of the Vedanta Sutra, its meaning, that attracted the attention of Sarvabhauma, actually, because of when he heard the different explanations of Atmarama verse. And notice that Mahaprabhu was humble all the way through, because he asked Sarvabhauma say something, and Sarvabhauma, said something according to his ability, and then Mahaprabhu outdid him in such a profound way that Sarvabhauma's intelligence was bewildered, and he started thinking, this must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then when he had that inkling of surrender to him, then Mahaprabhu revealed himself. And then he said, "Do you still think that I need to hear the Vedanta Sutra in order to become a better sannyasi?" Himanshu?
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. It also reminds of interaction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Prakashananda Saraswati. Mahaprabhu, the exemplary behavior of humility, it actually melted their heart, and even though they were thoroughly defeated, they felt quite nice about it.
That's right. Yeah, they felt quite nice about it. Mahaprabhu left everyone with that feeling of being encouraged, not embarrassed.
And related to this, actually, when Radhika Raman Prabhu was visiting here, I had asked him a question that, you go into so much of highly, scholarly circles where people naturally have their own interpretation of even the Vedic texts. So how do you interact with them? And, so he told that, he gave this example of Prakashana Saraswati and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, that naturally if you are nice and you, with your humility or, you with the proper behavior, you can make them appreciate Krishna consciousness and the culture. Scholastic wise, probably they will not come to terms right away.
Yeah. That's it. The last class of Duskriti is called Asuram Bhavamashritaha, or those of demoniac principles. This class is openly atheistic. Some of them argue that the Supreme Lord could never descend upon this material world, but they are unable to give any tangible reasons as to why not. There are others who make him subordinate to the impersonal feature, although the opposite is declared in the Gita. Envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the atheist will present a number of illicit incarnations manufactured in the factory of his brain. Such persons whose very principle of life is to decry the personality of Godhead cannot surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Sri Yamunacharya Alabhandaru of South India said, "O my Lord, you are unknowable to persons involved with atheistic principles, despite your uncommon qualities, features, and activities, despite your personalities being confirmed by all the revealed scriptures in the quality of goodness, and despite your being acknowledged by the famous authorities renowned for their depth of knowledge in the transcendental science and situated in godly qualities." Hare Krishna. Therefore, 1, grossly foolish persons, 2, the lowest of mankind, 3, the deluded speculators, and 4, the professed atheists, as above mentioned, never surrender under the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in spite of all scriptural and authoritative advice. Hare Krishna. Any last comments before we close that verse?
So, Prabhu, in order to, eventually these people come by the mercy of the devotees into Krishna consciousness. That's the only solace for them, correct?
Yeah.
So, is it that the devotees should, because we also do research and into all these things, so you also said that one who is satisfied in Krishna consciousness does not look elsewhere. So when one makes a career choice, should one think about doing all these great things and becoming a great scientist or technologist, and because it now needs a lot of energy, or take the career of being a saint? And can you accomplish the same thing in Krishna consciousness by being both? Or is it one has an advantage over other?
Generally, it's anybody who becomes great, it's nature, not nurture. At one time in one of my godbrothers was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj in Dallas. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj took this devotee to the house of one of his disciples who is, he said, the best cook in ISKCON. And so this devotee was taking the prasad and he said, "Yes, this is the best prasad I've ever had." And then he said, "I have to get this recipe and bring he had another disciple. He said, "I'd like to bring her over so she can learn this." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj looked at him with sort of disdain or disgust and said, It's not nurture, it's nature. In other words, she was born with this talent to cook like that. You'll never get anyone to cook like this. People who gravitate towards these kinds of careers that they can use in Krishna service and so forth, they tend to be born into them. You know, like you have Alfred Ford. He just happened to be born as the great-grandson of Henry Ford. And, you know, he's a humble soul. He's giving, you know, tens of millions of dollars to spread Krishna consciousness. And it just came to him. George Harrison, he could spread Krishna consciousness because using his fame. But I've seen dozens of devotees who thought that they were musicians, and maybe if they just worked hard enough, they could become like a big rock star. And their whole thing, the whole life, they were kind of hanging on to this thing and not really moving ahead in their career as a saint, as you say. They were more or less thinking that, you know, one day, you know, I'm going to be up there on stage and I'm really going to get a lot of people to chant, you know. And it would never happen. It just, those kinds of things, you know, better to go for the career of devotional service. And, you know, the best business is to become surrendered to Krishna. And then let him empower you the way he wants to. That's better. And if you have to go through a rigorous career in order to come to that point, then that's nice too. But I know when I was in business, there was a point at which I was talking to somebody on the phone, and I said, I'm wasting my breath. Because I was convincing somebody about something, and then I said, I'm not going to do it. After I hang up this phone, I'm not using my breath to do business anymore. It was a visceral feeling. It was like, enough's enough. Bahunam jamanamante gyanavam. It's like, okay, done, finished, over. It's over. I may have gone through the motions and some other things and winding it down to some degree, but there was a feeling that no mas. That's it. So if it happens to come to you like Radhika Raman, he happened to be born on a fast track, and things worked out in that way, it's fine. But the value of a good devotee is inestimable in the world. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, don't try to become a great devotee, just try to become a good devotee. If you just do that, it's so rare. Somebody who has spiritual integrity, they're so respected in the world, and they're such pillars, So anyway, you asked the question. I think that's the great crying need in the world, is somebody who's parampara, who's pure in their habits, who's interested in Bhagavatam, can explain it and so forth, or who's just an exemplary person. They become even if they're not great scholars or something, they're just exemplary. They set an example. Is that what you meant?
Yes, Prabhu. There's just one follow-up question, because this is from materialistic point of view, at least people around you, like how they perceive, or sometimes you even think, it could be because of immaturity, but what people generally think is if somebody leaves the material world and takes a spiritual life very seriously, they kind of think that they are parasites, or they are not.
At first they may think that, but then they'll go through situations in their life where they'll change their mind. Someone in their group will commit suicide, and they won't know how to reconcile it, and then they'll think of the devotee. Or somebody very dear to them will pass away, their grandmother or their mother or something like that, and then they'll gravitate towards the devotee. At some point of life, when you leave the association of people who are trying very hard, I mean, of course, family members, anybody. I told this story before. When I took my parents' ashes, I had them both at the same time because they died a year within anyway, it's a long story, but I had their ashes. I went to Vrindavan, and I met another devotee, Samapriya, whose mother had just died. She told me all about how she had been estranged from her family because she had gone into Krishna consciousness as her main concern in life. And she hadn't, given the kind of time to her parents as some of her siblings would have liked. And therefore, at least one of them had completely rejected her and said, well, I don't want to talk to you. I'll never talk to you again. And then her mother started dying. And then Samapriya came there to take care of her in her last 3 months of life. And the other family members, including this brother, was unable to do that. In fact, he couldn't even be around the situation that much. I saw that when my mother was dying. You know, sometimes some of them didn't want to see it. I can't be there for this. You know, you can be there. You're into this stuff. And we were all like, okay, this is it. Let's go. You know, bring in the team. You know, we were all ready. And they were like, okay, you deal with it. And that's what happened with Samapriya also. And after her mother died, and all the relatives saw what Samapriya had been able to do in those final days. The brother reconciled with her and came and said, now I understand. Now I understand. He said, we were meant to be with her during life. You were meant to be with her during death. And you were eminently qualified to do that because of what you've done throughout your life, of who you've become. Who can do that? Who can understand how to direct somebody at the time of death and be there for them in a non-sentimental way and actually understand what's taking place? What is it? Ukramantam sitam vapi bunjanan va gunam vitam vimudanana pashyanti gyana chakshusha. That the ignorant, they can't understand what's taking place at the time of death. So my point is that initially someone, you know, in your group might say, oh, you've just become a parasite. I don't think people think that anymore.
At least failed in your life or something like that.
Is what failed?
Yeah, it's a failure.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Let him. You know, Madhavendra Puri said, there's that poem where he said, let my my wealthy relatives call me a failure. Let the smart Brahmins say that I'm not following all the rules. I don't care. You know, I'm off to worship Krishna. It's a relief, actually. So, and you will be. It is the most valuable thing, and people will come to that point of realizing how valuable it is. Yeah. Yes, Lavanya.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. When we read the Bhagavatam and we read the stories, we read his Leelas. We are told again and again that we cannot understand what the Lord intends to do. Like certain situations where we say, why did that person do this? Or, what was he thinking? Again and again we are told that, this is how the Lord intends it to be. We're not to question. But with people who are smart, with jnanis and people like that, they always tend to catch the points in the story where it doesn't make sense. Like with Krishna's appearance. The question was, if you're going to have babies that a person's constantly going to kill, why would you have 8 babies? Would you just not stop? Don't you see pain and stop? And I didn't have an answer to that question. It's a very practical, logical question. We learn as we read to just accept the flow of the story. And, there's a purpose. We try to understand the purpose and the meaning behind the story. We try to understand Kamsa's attitude and the attitude of people who are vicious, who are that you cannot trust them, that their mind goes both ways. Those are the things we catch from the stories. But when we hand over the Bhagavatam to others and then they want to talk to us about it, sometimes this happens that they look at it and say, how can all this be real? These ideas, and you're saying that this is actually the truth, but this looks more like a story than anything else because it doesn't make sense. How do we talk to people when they come up with these kind of logical reasons why the book doesn't make sense?
Well, you can see that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a dry logician. How did Gopinathacharya speak to him? Of course, he had a very intimate relationship with him, but he sort of, he just told him, you're a loser. You don't understand anything. And Sarvabhauma was a little taken back and said, what are you talking about? How do you know? How do you know him and I know? And he said, because I have the mercy. I understand that he's God and you don't. Therefore, people who are who don't have any sukriti, they'll pick out all kinds of non sequiturs in the philosophy and try to deal with that. But Prabhupada used to point out that even the material energy is achintya. They may say, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. The whole material universe doesn't make sense either. And you can't prove anything. Prove you're alive. Prove you exist. Can you do that? You can't prove that you exist, actually, even. You can rationalize, you can appreciate it yourself, that, well, I know I exist. I can feel that I exist. Okay, prove it to me that you really exist. Maybe you don't. And Prabhupada would point out how the material nature is achintya, that it's inconceivable. How, a lemon tree grows out of a seed and produces ascorbic acid and so many things. So the so-called tendency towards finding fault with a lila, Krishna's lila or something like that, because it doesn't make sense or something like that, is it's born from this duskriti, trying to discount the fact that God exists. How to deal with those things? It really depends. It's an individual, case-by-case basis. A classic example, when Shraddha Devi Dasi and I were distributing books together in Santa Cruz, we met this heavy mental speculator and his daughter. And I had shown him a book, and he was speculating about all these things, why religion is just actually caused so much harm in the world, and if it wasn't for religion, we wouldn't have all these wars, blah, 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 blah. He was going on and on and on about so many things. And then he asked me, is it free? And I said, donation. And he went, I knew it. It's just capitalistic, and, all you want's money. It's just motivated, And then he really went off. He said, God, this book talks about God. There's no difference between God and a lamppost. And he went on forever. And we listened to him. I didn't try to provoke him one way or another. I just went, interesting. Interesting. Went on, and then he suddenly just changed his mind. He goes, well, all right, anyway, here's a donation. She was there, witness. He gave a donation.
Did he just want to be heard? Because I find that sometimes they're just confused. When we try to give them something, they've already been looking at so many other places. Their mind is constantly their biggest demon. They're constantly rotating their thoughts. They've read so much that there's really no space anymore. They're shuffling everything, and they're searching. And I wonder that if we could give them just the hearing, not absorbing, but the hearing.
Yeah.
Just standing there.
Vita, raga, bhaya, krodha. And as Krishna says, you have to overcome these three obstacles. And then he said many people have overcome these obstacles. So raga, bhaya, krodha. Raga means this attachment to the material world. And bhaya means fear of a personal existence. That we actually have a relationship with God. I fear that relationship. And because so many other relationships have failed and are severed, even if they haven't failed, that I fear that my relationship with God might not be also satisfying, and how would I feel then? And then krodha means that you become angry, that you've heard so many different philosophies, and then you just discount all of them and say that there is, you're all contradicting each other. The Leela contradicts itself. I don't believe in anything. And then they take intoxication in order to experience it. That's what Prabhupada says in the purport. So Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha Manmaya Mamupashrita Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Putamad Bhavamagataha. He says many of these types of people have become purified in the past and have come to me. So there is a way through contacting them with devotional service, they can gradually be purified. I've seen it before. People transform their lives. They completely change. My mother was she was a sociologist, very educated person, and she would entertain philosophy or or Krishna consciousness, all within a sociological realm. Oh, that's very interesting. Now let's analyze this from this point of view, but not from the point of view of the absolute truth. But gradually, because of her connection through me with Krishna consciousness, just incidentally, I don't know how she was thinking about Krishna, but because I was in the Krishna consciousness movement, she thought, when I gave her a calendar for the BBT pictures, she used to keep it at her desk. Somehow, all these little things added up over time. And once Nirkul and I were cooking, and then she was about to taste something. She said, you can't taste it. And she said, Krishna steals butter all the time. And then she walked off. And we were standing there thinking, what happened here? I mean, little things like that. Maya Pritagyana can become purified just by association. And we heard this verse the other day in Toronto, and earlier in our reading, Prahlad Maharaj says that the devotee, even if they're a dog eater, if they're devoted to Krishna, they can purify not only themselves but their whole family. And he said, but a great scholar or a Brahmin with all the Brahminical qualifications, if they don't believe in Krishna, they can't purify even themselves. So sometimes even these Maya Pritagyanas, they appreciate something about Krishna consciousness accidentally or incidentally, and then they become suddenly caught up in it and purified,
I was thinking when you're talking about your mother that there's one effect in that whole equation that I forgot, that she must have loved you very dearly. She may not know what you're doing or because I noticed with my dad, because he spends a lot of time having conversations with me on a lot of books and other stuff, but I don't read anything anymore. He's very upset with me that I don't read anything. I'm only reading the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. And, of all the things in the world to read, that is not for you, You should read other stuff. So we work, but then I noticed that because I'm very dear to him, he has taken time out to find logical conclusions about why you shouldn't be wasting your time with those books. And he's actually wasting, within quotes, his time with the books to make sure I don't. And it was really nice to hear the story about your mother, because it gives us an understanding that how Krishna works.
Yeah.
He's working. We don't see it, but he's
definitely,
working all around us.
He's working there. Shamalangi.
So this is related to the same thing, but I have seen that, the people, even if they're not following Krishna consciousness, and if they get to observe somebody who is following it, they may be resentful, but, if you just quietly keep on practicing, even if they are nearby, actually I've noticed they are attracted. Something attracts them. They see that these people have something which I do not have. They slowly realize, and sometimes if you just leave them to, their thinking also, later they come and ask, oh, so what is this? How do you do this? What happens? Do you feel any difference? Especially after the home programs, I have noticed a lot of people coming and asking, and it's very nice. How they change. You can see little small transformations. It's very nice to see those.
It is, yeah. One devotee had to go home to another country. She had to leave and go and to be with her family because one of her relatives was very ill. And she was really worried about it because her family members were not Krishna conscious. And so she was asking me, what should I do when I get there? Should I preach to them? Should I not preach to them? Whatever. And I said, don't try to tell them anything, but just be very regulated in your habits. And so she did it, and she wrote me back a few weeks after she had been there, and she said, it's really working, because I respectfully get up, and excuse myself when it's time for me to go do my japa, and I go do it sort of privately. And then she said, my relatives started asking me, well, so what's it like? What are you doing? And everything like that. And then another week later, and then several of them were begging her, will you show us how to do it? And then they were chanting, and before she left, there were like 3 or 4 relatives who were chanting and stuff. So it is very nice to watch these kinds of things. The holy name has its effect.
So I have to add, so my ex-mother-in-law, we were in Christmas in Seattle, and Kevin, he's one of the devotees who sells the printouts of paintings and stuff. So he brought like big frame painting and gave us in Seattle as a gift. There's no way we could bring that in a plane. So we left it at my in-laws' place. And so every time someone came, the Chrissy had to explain everyone what that was. Because it was in her living room, big picture. And then every time when we visited, she will put Bhagavad Gita, because back of that it's Prabhupada's picture, and she knows that if it's not offered, we won't eat. So she would put Prabhupada there, and then she said, okay, you feed Krishna, and then only my kids will eat. So that was her mantra. And that's how she... So after when we left Seattle, my father-in-law, who became a vegetarian when he was visiting Ahmedabad temple, was sitting with Yashara Prabhu for 6 hours while we were buying the train tickets and stuff. So everything she started making vegetarian, she would just put it on that table. She won't tell anybody she's offering or anything. But I was just wondering that how Krishna has his own way of working.
Yeah. Nice.
Even with the home programs, when I started the home program, some of the other people came with me. And then I came back a year later to one of the home programs that Sukeshi Mataji was running. And this person came back. She'd taken a break and she'd come back. And for some reason, she caught hold of me and said, you've really changed. So how did you get here? Because she was like, we also started with you, but I don't feel anything changing. And I didn't know how to answer her because I didn't expect a question like that. And I thought about it. And I said, I told her, you should come to the temple more often, spend more time with the devotees, and you will find that they will guide you along your path, and then you will get there as you keep going. But she didn't want that answer. But she did want the change. If she wanted it, she'd have attended the programs regularly, and it would have
Otherwise, she wouldn't have been
her.
so interested, right?
Yeah. She really wanted that, but there's a commitment that we make to get there from A to B.
Yeah.
A lot of people find that commitment is an issue for them, to attend the class regularly or come to the temple regularly. We tell them to offer prasadam, and it starts like that. But as you said, everybody has their journey. It takes longer for others. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do we tell them when they say, I want to get there, but...
Well, just be really nice to people. And when you see an opening, when they actually sincerely do want some guidance, and they say, no, show me, bring me, whatever, then bring them. But otherwise, you can't drag people. Up till then, you have to be... of course, you have to... One devotee was telling me that he had been chanting, 2 rounds, 4 rounds, 6 rounds, something like that, thinking, maybe sometime in the future I will increase. And then Kratu Prabhu, Kratu? Yeah, very direct, heavy preacher, And he met Kratu, and Kratu looked at him and goes, so you're going to chant 16 rounds? And he was like so shocked that he goes, okay, yeah. When I met him, he said, I'm chanting 16 rounds, because Kratu kind of shot him one day. You going to chant 16 rounds or not? Yes. And he started chanting. And so some people are ready for that. And an expert preacher like Kratu can recognize that in someone. He'll see, ripe fruit. Okay, come on, get in the basket. We're going, All right. Okay, now tell me where we are. Oh, 39, right? Are we in the purport? Yeah. Did we start the purport? Oh, yeah, we did. That's how we got into Namo to screeching. There is, especially in this age of Kali, therefore, especially in this age of Kali, the mind must be cleansed, and this is possible only by the chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Everyone please say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna! Cheto Darpana Marjanam. In this age, the process of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the only method by which to cleanse the sinful mind. When the mind is completely cleansed of all sinful reaction, one can then understand his duty in the human form of life. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant to educate sinful men so that they may become pious simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Nama Eva Kevalam, Kalau Nastyeva 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 Gatiranyata, to cleanse the heart so that one may become sober and wise. In this age of Kali, there is no value to any method other than the chanting of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Prahlad Maharaj has confirmed this process in the previous verses. Tvad virya gayana mahamrida magna chitta. Prahlad further confirms, find that verse? Prahlad further confirms that if one's mind is always absorbed in thought of Krishna, that very qualification will purify one and keep one purified always. To understand the Lord and His activities, one must free his mind from all contamination of the material world. And this one can achieve by simply chanting the Lord's holy name. Thus, one becomes free from all material bondage. Listen, isn't this nice? To understand the Lord and His activities, one must free his mind from all contamination of the material world. What a relief, huh? Oh, so it's a head. Tvad virya gayana maham mrita magna chitta. Tvad virya means your lordship's glories and activities. Tvad virya. Gayana from chanting and distributing, Prabhupada gives. Maha Amrita, in the great ocean of nectarian spiritual bliss. Magna Chitta, whose consciousness is absorbed. Twadvirya Gayana Maha Amrita Magna Chitta. So in this purport he says that Prahlad has confirmed this process in the previous verses. Twadvirya Gayana Maha Amrita Magna Chitta. Previous because it's cyclical. You keep going through. And the next verse says, so this purport confirms, again, Prabhupada confirms that by chanting Hare Krishna, one's mind becomes free from all contamination. And once one's mind is free from all contamination, then one can see the Lord. And who can confirm that through Shastra? Yes? Translation. He's the avatar, right?
He's the avatar for his age, and then by chanting, one directly associates with the Lord. This there isn't now.
And Jagat Nistar means that he can deliver the whole, by that mantra can deliver the whole universe, right? And I was thinking of the verse we thought of earlier, because when you come to clear consciousness, then automatically you can see Krishna. What's that verse? Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Puman Upavrita. Upavrita means he's revealed. When Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam, when one comes to Vasudev consciousness, Vasudev. In Vasudev stage, then Vasudeva is revealed. Pure consciousness. Do you have that verse? What's the next line? Sattve Chitasmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Hyadhoksajo Hyadhoksajo me namasa vidiyate. Okay.
But that's the previous verse where it was talking about how chanting you can overcome the material. That was 18 in the same chapter. 7, 9, 18 is where Prahlad Maharaj says.
7, 9, 18.
Yeah.
Soham priyasa surida paridevataya lila katastavana shringa varincha gita ajnas tirtam yanugranang guna vipramukto durgani te parayugalaya hangsa sangha. O my Lord Nrsimha, by engaging in your transcendental loving service in the association of devotees who are liberated souls, Hangsas, I shall become completely uncontaminated by the association of the three modes of material nature and be able to chant the glories of your Lordship, who are so dear to me. I shall chant your glories following exactly the footsteps of Lord Brahma in his disciplic succession. In this way, I shall undoubtedly be able to cross the ocean of nations. Nice. Yeah, so that was pointing back to that verse, and then Prabhupada gives Twadvirya Gayana Mahamrina Magnachita. Prahlad further confirms that if one's mind is absorbed, and that's coming up in a few verses. So the next verse is Chivai kato chuta vikarshati mavratripta shishnonyatastvaduraram shavanam kutaschit granonyatascha padadrikvacha karma shaktir bhavyasapatna iva geha patim lunanti. My dear Lord, O infallible one, my position is like that of a person who has many wives, all trying to attract him in their own way. For example, the tongue is attracted to palatable dishes, the genitals to sex with an attractive woman, and the sense of touch to contact with soft things. The belly, although filled, still wants to eat more, and the ear, not attempting to hear about you, is generally attracted to cinema songs. The sense of smell is attracted to yet another side. The restless eyes are attracted to scenes of sense gratification, and the active senses are attracted elsewhere. In this way, I am certainly embarrassed. Purport: the human form of life is meant for God realization, but this process, which begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, hearing and chanting the holy name of the Lord, is disturbed as long as our senses are materially attracted. Therefore, devotional service means purifying the senses. Devotional service means what? In the conditioned state, our senses are covered by material sense gratification. And as long as one is not trained in purifying the senses, one cannot become a devotee. In our Krishna consciousness movement, therefore, we advise from the very beginning that one restrict the activities of the senses, especially the tongue, which is described by Srila Bhaktivinoda as most greedy and unconquerable. To stop this attraction of the tongue, one is authoritatively advised to not accept meat or similar uneatable things, nor to allow the tongue to hanker to drink or smoke. Even the drinking of tea and coffee is not permitted. Similarly, the genitals must be restricted from illicit sex. Without such restraint of the senses, one cannot make advancement in Krishna consciousness. The only method of controlling the senses is to chant and hear the holy name of the Lord. Otherwise, one will always be disturbed, as a householder with more than one wife would be disturbed by them for sense gratification. Comments? Text 41. Evam swakarma patitam bhavavaitaranyam anyonya janma maranashara pita pitam pasyanjanam swaparavigraha maitram hanteti parachara piprihimura madhya. My dear Lord, you are always transcendently situated on the other side of the river of death. But because of the reactions of our own activities, we are suffering on this side. Indeed, we have fallen into this river and are repeatedly suffering the pains of birth and death and eating horrible things. Now kindly look upon us, not only upon me, but also upon all others who are suffering. And by your causeless mercy and compassion, deliver us and maintain us. Purport: Prahlad Maharaj, a pure Vaishnava, prays to the Lord not only for himself, but for all other suffering living entities. There are two classes of Vaishnavas, the Bhajananandis and Goshtyanandis. The Bhajananandis worship the Lord only for their own personal benefit. But the Goshtyanandis try to elevate all others to Krishna consciousness so that they may be saved. Fools who cannot perceive repeated birth and death and the other miseries of materialistic life cannot be sure of what will happen to them in their next birth. Indeed, these foolish, materially contaminated rascals have manufactured an irresponsible way of life that does not consider the next life. They do not know that according to one's own activities, one receives a body selected from 8,400,000 species. These rascals have been described in Bhagavad Gita as Duskritinu Muda. Non-devotees, those who are not Krishna conscious, must engage in sinful activities, and therefore they are mudhas, fools and rascals. They are such fools that they do not know what will happen to them in their next life. Although they see varieties of living creatures eating abominable things, pigs eating stool, crocodiles eating all kinds of flesh, and so on, they do not realize that they themselves, because of their practice of eating all kinds of nonsense in this life, will be destined to eat the most abominable things in their next life. A Vaishnava is always afraid of such an abominable life, and to free himself from such horrible conditions, he engages himself in the devotional service of the Lord. The Lord is compassionate to them, and therefore he appears for their benefit. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttanam adharmasya tadatmanam srajamyaham. Whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, a descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of your religion, at that time I descend myself. The Lord is always ready to help the fallen souls, and because they are fools and rascals, they do not take to Krishna consciousness and abide by the instructions of Krishna. Therefore, although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is personally the Supreme Lord Krishna, he comes as a devotee to preach the Krishna consciousness movement. Jari dako tare kaha Krishna Upadesh. One must therefore become a sincere servant of Krishna. Amara gnaya guru hana tara desh. One should become a guru and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world simply by preaching the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. There it is. Comments?
Maharaj, you know that this is my favorite verse from the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. I really like the fact that Prahlad Maharaj is asking benedictions not only for himself but for others as well. That shows the magnanimity of his heart.
Yeah. Nice. Why do you like that?
I had a comment.
What? I was asking Shraddha why she likes that. There's a short connection in that box, and the box is what does it.
So the main thing that struck me was that, he's not just talking about himself when he's standing in front of the Lordship. He's asking about others as well. And then I also like the way that there is such a graphic description of the material world that he has given. We are living on this side of the river of death, and we eat horrible things. And I kind of related that because I was a non-vegetarian before, and I would eat anything that moved like that. So these are horrible things to do. And and also one was that because of reactions to our own activities, we are suffering. So that also takes ownership of that. And when I was exposed to Krishna consciousness, I was actually I was sick for a very long time because of problems with my hands, and I was always blaming everybody till I started reading Prabhupada's books, and then I realized that the situation that I am in is purely my doing, and it's my own karmic reactions. You cannot blame anybody else. So that way I was able to relate a lot to whatever was said in this particular verse. So, that's
really nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maharaj.
I actually had a comment on the previous verse. Whenever I hear that translation, including cinema songs, I always, it's really like how Prabhupada put that special word cinema song there. Because, in India, like the Hindi movie, Bollywood songs, even if you don't watch, but one person hums or you hear it on the mic being played, some festival or some party is going on. It's so addictive. Even you don't like it or you're not even paying attention, but it comes to you. And now I've not been like watching movies, not watching TV, like nowhere close to like Hindi songs. But still, I don't know from where. Sometimes I suddenly notice, I am, that tune is coming into my mind. Then try to get rid of it immediately. But it's very it's how subtle it is, from where it comes in. So whenever I read that cinema songs like this translation, it really makes me think how true it is, how addictive these things can be.
One thing is when those cinema songs come, there's some kirtaniyas who are very expert, and then they just they learn the tune for the Hare Krishna mantra. In fact, there's one tune that's popular in ISKCON that goes around, and one of the devotees told me, that's from a Bollywood movie. And there are other songs that, like B.B. Govindamars has picked up some tunes. One was from Peter Gabriel, who's a pop singer. And it's a very become a popular tune. But he just actually the story was Shivaram Maharaj heard it playing somewhere, and he told B.V. Govinda Maharaj, because he's an expert musician, he said, you should turn that into the Hare Krishna mantra. So he did, and then it kind of propagated. So next time that tune comes up, see if you can calibrate it to the holy name. And that way it'll purify it rather than trying to chase it away. It might work, yes.
I just wanted to add two more comments to Shamalangi's, because I go through that same thing as well that she does. And the first was that for most of the romantic Bollywood movies, if you substitute the hero with the Krishna, then it makes perfect sense. Yeah. You can do that. And the second thing was that I also used to think that there are a lot of other devotional songs also that people make along the tunes of popular Hindi movies. And I always used to think that, so these devotional people are copying these songs. And then I realized that the music is so old. Like, we talk about Sam Vedas. It's a book full of songs. So obviously, the ragas and all that were already defined. So these Hindi movies, songs are based on certain ragas. It's not that we are copying them. On the other hand, they are copying us.
With so much of culture. Actually, even the scientific world originally was, there was scientific research, but it was more meant to verify the existence of God, and then it became two different things, atheistic science and then religion. Partha.
What Shraddha was saying was about how Prahlad was praying for everyone else. It was reminding me of one time in Vrindavan, Gargamuni Prabhu was up on stage during, I think, Prabhupada's appearance there, and he was saying he was dressed in like a tie-dye T-shirt and like the whole thing, and he said, well, some people might not think it's appropriate for me to be here, but I'm here because of the three words that Prabhupada wrote at the bottom of the letter to me, your ever well-wisher. And that was coming to my mind after, if you're a devotee, he doesn't even pray for himself.
I was there for that, when he gave that offering. Yeah.
He doesn't see the need for praying for himself, he just prays for the well-being. He's the ever well-wisher of every living entity.
So for those who are listening, Parthasarthi Prabhu was making the point that it was a disappearance day at Prabhupada, and Gargamuni Prabhu got up on this, old Gargamuni, one of the original devotees from 26 2nd Avenue, got up on the stage and he gave his offering, and he was saying that, actually he was saying, some of you might appreciate me because he was ripping off all the music from all the artists and selling it in his own shop. He said, some of you don't like me, but Prabhupada likes me. And he said I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And he said, Prabhupada signed his letter, your ever well-wisher. And so he was just expressing this beautiful sentiment about how Prabhupada was the ever well-wisher of all living entities, because he was perfectly Krishna conscious. And that's a symptom of a Krishna conscious person, is a well-wisher of others. They have the capacity to be well-wisher and not try to exploit others.
Sir, regarding this well-wisher point, Prabhuji, especially these days, like, there is no time even for two people in the family to sit and talk. But though they have so much like modern equipments and everything to reduce the time of doing the work. But at least by reading Prabhupada's books, I could really, like we have been reading since morning, like there is nobody else who can give us so much comfort when we are in distress than Prabhupada through his purports. Like, who would say that these are all the problems, that you would come and a devotee does this to avoid that? So I think just by reading these purports, we can understand how much Prabhupada has undergone in his life, and also he's receiving it from the acharyas and giving it to us according to time, place and circumstances. So I really thank you for encouraging us to read, and there is no
Thanks
happiness
for
beyond that.
Me. You're always here. I was just thinking that. You're always here. Whenever there's hearing going on, you're there. So, but your point is so nice, because I realize sometimes, in the scheme of life these days, there's so many anxieties and pressures and so forth. Oh, okay, thanks. And the rotation of my own life, I always realize if there is some anxiety, undue anxiety, then the cure is to sit down and finish my pages. Because once I sit down and I read Bhagavatam or any of Prabhupada's purports for a nice length of time, then my intelligence, my mind becomes pacified, and my intelligence becomes fortified. And that's the only solution. That and chanting. And earlier, Prabhupada was talking about how the chanting process is the only thing that actually works to purify the consciousness. And even though sometimes it takes a while to break through because the mind is easily contaminated, and it's so fickle also. It's such a subtle sense that it can move around so much that it's important to sit down and regularly chant and expose oneself to the vibration of the holy name, because just by doing that, the mind becomes purified, and the other senses do too. So the basics, we always move forward with the basics. Be absorbed and dedicated to the basics. Every day, hearing and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and hearing the Bhagavatam purports. That keeps one on a steady path over many years. Pooja's weighing in now. This is getting heavy. Let's go.
I was reading a lecture by Mahavishnu Maharaj, and he was talking about cleanliness, and he was saying when chanting is the way to keep ourselves clean inside, and then he was saying cleanliness is not a one-time thing in your life where you just get rid of all your anarthas, but it's every time you sit and chant. That's when you get rid of all.
That's a really nice point. It's a really nice point. Just like you clean your room, and then 3 days later, isn't it? Or sometimes 1 day later. I can't believe it. I live in a room, small room, but I'm not messy, but the room just it's full of dust, and if you leave it for a little while, the spiders move in, everything. Yeah, so you have to constantly be purifying yourself through the process. Yes.
So, as Mataji, makes the points like how the Prabhupada's purports and books is satisfying us. Like a few weeks ago only, from the morning there was thoughts going on in my mind. Like the marriage is getting decided and family members is not coming and what going to be. And I'm missing them so much. And, one time, because they cannot come and this and that and situations were there. So much things in the mind. I went to work, even I cannot focus on work. And then what is the solution? I try to, practical level, I try to solve that. Try to, give instructions to my mind, but it was not working. And then I took 15 minutes break and went out, and in my phone I opened the 8th canto and the 2nd chapter Gajendra's story. I just read out the translations for 15 verses. And I don't know how that thought's gone on in my mind. And the whole day and after the 1 week, that thought totally out of my mind. And very peaceful. So, Prabhupada's translation and purport is really working that.
Medicine. In fact, that chapter, there's a benediction at the end that if one hears this chapter of Gajendra, then one won't see bad dreams. Shraddha, you were going to say?
I was just going to expand on Gandharvika Mataji's comment that these days we are so short of time that we don't have time even for our loved ones. And in contrasting that to the real well-wishers like Prabhupada, they spend their entire time, and we can see the fervor with which Prabhupada was translating the books towards, the later part of his life, even while he was on his deathbed, so to speak. And I was also reminded of how you and Nirakla Mataji, both of you, if we ever come to you, both have super busy lives, but if we come to you with some problems that we have, you give us total attention at that time, as if, there's nobody else in the world. It's just you and I, or Nirakla Mataji and I, and then, so although we say so I was just thinking that, the love that you have for us is more than the love that we have for our own kids. Like, I don't spend time that much with my own daughter if she was to come. So thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Pardon me?
But when you love us, you don't have anything.
It connects to what you were teaching us in one of your lectures, that attention is love. When you give someone your time and your attention, and if you really love them, you'll give them your time and attention, because that's the right.
Yeah, I picked that up from Satyadev. It's a Satyadevism. Doesn't it sound like one? You give your attention, that's love. It's like, whoa, that's far out. So, but it's really true. If you that's what we have. That's all we have, really, is our attention. I think I have so many things, but it's a concoction that I have so many things. What I really have is my attention and where I put it. That I vote. I vote with my attention. Okay. Here we go. Right? 42? Konyatra te kilakoro bhagavan prayasa utarane swabhava sambhava lopa hetoho Mudeshu vai maharanugraha arta bandho kim tena te priyajanan anusevatam naha. O my Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, original spiritual master of the entire world, what is the difficulty for you who manage the affairs of the universe in delivering the fallen souls engaged in your devotional service? You are the friend of all suffering humanity, and for great personalities it is necessary to show mercy to the foolish. Therefore, I think that you will show your causeless mercy to persons like us who engage in your service. Purport. Here the words Priyajanan, Anusevatam na, indicate that the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is very favorable to devotees who act according to the instructions of his own pure devotee. This is such an important point. There's a verse in the 10th canto, which is in your book, in your shloka book. We should look at it. And the verse says that by following the footsteps of the devotees, the ocean of the material world shrinks to the size. Page 238? Oh, here it is. 10-230, page 249. Twayambujakshika, Twayambujaksha kila satvadamni, Twayambujaksha kila satvadamni samadhi naveshit chetasaike, Tvatpada potena mahatkritena kurvanti govatsa padam bababdim. Can I have that? 10-230. And the translation is, O lotus-eyed Lord, by concentrating one's meditation on your lotus feet, which are the reservoir of all existence, and by accepting those lotus feet as the boat by which to cross over the ocean of nescience, one follows in the footsteps of the Mahajans, great sages and saints and devotees. By this process, simple process, one can cross the ocean of nescience as easily as one steps over the hoofprint of a calf. Prayers by the demigods for Lord Krishna within the womb. It's not what you know, it's who you know and who you follow. And the purport is, the true mission in life is to cross the ocean of nescience, of repeated birth and death. Those in the darkness of ignorance, however, do not know this mission, instead being carried away by the waves of material nature, prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha. They are undergoing the tribulations of mrityu sangsaravartmani, repeated birth and death. But persons who have achieved knowledge by the association of devotees follow the Mahajans, Mahatkritena. It's called Mahatkritena. Such a person always concentrates his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord and executes one or more of the 9 varieties of devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. Simply by this process, one can cross the ocean, the insurmountable ocean of nations. Isn't that fabulous? Devotional service is powerful in any form. Sri Vishnu Shravane Parikshit Abhavad Vaisesika Kirtane. What? I think that we should take that verse and, you know how we're doing those nectar verses? We add on a verse that we all chant together. That should be one of them. 1-2-267, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. According to this verse, Maharaj Parikshit became liberated by fully concentrating his mind on hearing the Lord's holy name, attributes, and pastimes. Similarly, Shukadeva Goswami simply glorified the Lord, and by speaking on the subject matters of Krishna that constitute the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, he too was liberated. One may also be liberated simply by sakya, friendly behavior with the Lord, such as the power of devotional service, as we learn from the examples set by the Lord's many pure devotees. Swayambhur Naradash, go ahead. This is your verse. Bravo. We have to follow in the footsteps of such devotees, for by this one easy process, one can cross the great ocean of nations, just as one might cross a small hole created by the hoof of a calf. Here the word is described as ambujaksha, O Lord. The Lord is described as ambujaksha, or lotus-eyed. By seeing the eyes of the Lord, which are compared to lotus flowers, one becomes so satisfied that one does not want to turn his eyes to anything else. Simply by seeing the transcendental form of the Lord, a devotee is at once fully absorbed in the Lord in his heart. This absorption is called samadhi. Dhyana vastita tadgatina manasa pashanti yam yogina. A yogi, can you find that verse, please? A yogi is fully absorbed in thoughts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for he has no other business than to think of the Lord always within his heart. It is also said, Samashitaye padapalava plavam mahat padam punya yasho marare pavam pudir vatsa padam param padam 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 yadvi padam natesham. A more pleasing verse was never composed. For one who has accepted the boat of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation, and is famous as Murari, the enemy of the demon Mura, the ocean in the material world is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. His goal is Parampadam, or Vaikuntha, the place where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. This process is recommended here by authorities like Brahma and Lord Shiva, Swayambhur Narada Shambhu. And therefore, we must take to this process in order to transcend nations. This is exciting. Following the footsteps of these great acharyas, Mahajans. This is very easy. But we must follow in the footsteps of great personalities, and then success will be possible. In regard to the word Mahatkritena, here's my point. It is also significant that the process shown by great devotees is not only for them, but also for others. If things are made easy, this affords facility for the person who has made them easy, and also for others who follow the same principles. The process recommended in this verse for crossing the ocean of nations is easy not for the devotee, but not only for the devotee, but also for common persons who follow the devotee. Mahajano yena gatasa panta. Yeah, this process of following. Learning back to the verse, Jnana vastita tadgatina manasa pashanti yam yogina. Apparently it's in this verse, number 1 of the 12th chapter, 12th canto, 13th chapter, the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. You want to hear it? Yes. You're darn tootin', huh? Yeah, 12:13:1. Who would have guessed? It's a long verse. Yam Brahma Varunendra Ruja Maruta Studvanti Divyastavar Vedai Sangha Padakramo Panashader Gayanti Yam Samaga Dhyana Vastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam Navadur Sahasura Devaya Tasmai Namah. Sutta Goswami said, unto that personality whom Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Rudra, and the Maruts praise by chanting transcendental hymns and reciting the Vedas with all their corollaries, padakramas, and Upanishads, to whom the chanters of the Samaveda always sing, whom the perfected yogis see within their minds after fixing themselves in trance and absorbing themselves within him, and whose limit can never be found by any demigod or demon. Under that Supreme Personality of Godhead, I offer my humble obeisances. Dhyana. Dhyana in meditative trance, avastita, situated, tadgatena, which is fixed upon him, manasa, within the mind, pashanti yam yogina, the mystic yogis see. Fantastic. So, oh. Wow, I got piled up here. Shastra pile up. Okay. Here we are. It says, Prabhupada writes, here the words Priyajanan Anusevatamna indicate that the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of God, is very favorable to devotees who act according to the instructions of his own pure devotee. It's very important. So if one follows the instructions of a pure devotee, then Krishna takes it. He takes it. In other words, one must become the servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. If one wants to become the servant of the Lord directly, this is not as fruitful as engaging the service of the Lord's servant. This is the direction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who shows us the way to become Gopi Bhartu Padakamalayur Das Das Anudasaha. One should not be proud of becoming directly the servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, one must seek a pure devotee, a servant of the Lord, and engage oneself in the service of such a servant. The more one becomes the servant of the servant, the more one becomes perfect in devotional service. This is also the injunction of Bhagavad Gita. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshyo vidu. One can understand the science of the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by the parampara system. In this regard, Srila Narottam Das Thakur says, Tandera charana sevi bhaktasani bas, janame hoye abilas, hari hadaya nama Krishna yadavaya namaha, harai nama Krishna yadavaya namaha, Gopal Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. Let me serve the lotus feet of the devotees of the Lord, and let me live with the devotees. Tandera charana sevi bhaktasani bas. Janame hoy e abilash. Following Narottam Das Thakur, one should aspire to be a servant of the Lord's servant. Life after life. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also sings, Tumita Thakur Tomar Kukur Bulia Janaha Mori. O my Lord, O Vaishnava, please consider me your dog. One must become the dog of a Vaishnava, a pure devotee, for a pure devotee can deliver Krishna without difficulty. I told you probably before, but I'll mention in this. I was with my godbrother, senior godbrother, and I was in Jagannath Puri riding on a rickshaw. For some reason I brought it up to him. We were talking about devotee names, and I said, why do you think Prabhupada named me Vaisesika? He goes, what do you care? Could have called you Lucky or Sparky. As long as he names you something, you're his dog. What do you care? One must become the dog of a Vaishnava, a pure devotee, for a pure devotee can deliver Krishna without difficulty. Krishna setumar, Krishna dite paro. Krishna is the property of his pure devotee. And if we take shelter of a pure devotee, he can deliver Krishna very easily. Prahlad wants to engage in the service of a devotee, and therefore he prays to Krishna, "My dear Lord, kindly give me the shelter of your very dear devotee so that I may engage in his service and you may then be pleased." That's a nice prayer to keep, to recite before you chant japa or when you wake up. So many things. It's a good prayer. "My dear Lord, kindly give me the shelter of your very dear devotee so that I may engage in his service and you may then be pleased." And it's oftentimes, just prayer that please give me the association of pure devotees and the empowerment to take full advantage of the association. Or, please give me the association of pure devotees and I promise to take full advantage of it. Because it's 50-50. You don't make him do everything. But if you ask him, please give me association of pure devotees and I promise, out of my sincerity that I'm offering you now, I will take full advantage of that association. Madbhakta Pujabhyadika 11:19-21. That's a phrase that's embedded in this long verse, 11:19-21. The Lord says, "Engaging in the service of my devotee is better than trying to engage in my devotional service." Thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. Do you live in the area? Where? Sunnyvale. Oh, thanks for coming all the way over. How did you find it, the temple? Oh, really? You're a Nrsimhan Bhakta? Wow. Well, we're fortunate that you came on this day. How do you like the new place? How do you like our new place? It's better than Bascom, right? A little bit. Well, thanks for coming over. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Hare Krishna. Jai. Another significant point in this verse is that by devotional service, Prahlad Maharaj does not want to benefit alone. Rather, he prays to the Lord that all of us fallen souls in this material world may, by the grace of the Lord, engage in the service of his servant and thus be delivered. The grace of the Lord is not at all difficult for the Lord to bestow, and thus Prahlad Maharaj wants to save the whole world by spreading Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Can I what? Read it again? The grace of the Lord is not at all difficult for the Lord to bestow, and thus Prahlad Maharaj wants to save the whole world by spreading Krishna consciousness. Well, I mean, Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostane. He's an ocean of mercy. He's got plenty of mercy to distribute. And
why I'm asking is in relation to Bahunam Janmanamante and seeing a pure devotee is very rare. But we also say that Krishna is it's easy for Krishna to give the grace. So then why are devotees rare?
well, because their appreciating capacity is not developed. It's not that Krishna's not, he's all merciful and he's fully available. Even his personal form is distributed throughout the material world, but I can't see it because I'm turning the other way. It's not him, it's me. And as soon as I become, the very moment that I'm eager to know Krishna and I turn my attention back to him, immediately he reacts and gives himself. And then the process that we find arduous going through anartha nivritti and such is still my stubbornness to give up the last vestiges of my attachment to the material world. Some stubbornness may be there. So what appears to me to be Krishna's unwillingness to give his mercy, or I don't see in context that he is giving me his mercy in various ways. Because he's actually purifying me of my attachment to the material world and so forth. I see in dualistic terms, and I don't see, how it's all for my own good by Krishna's mercy. Yeah, and it's the also implicit in this verse is that the pure devotees desiring to help other people actually benefits the world. It's the grace of the devotee who's distributing the Lord's mercy, because in another way, samoham sarvabhuteshu nami dveshosti napriya. The Lord says, I'm equal to everyone. He maintains this position in the material world that if someone wants to forget him, then he'll say, okay, I'll give you facility to do that. But the devotee is very proactive, because he knows that Krishna really wants the souls to come back to him, so he makes all kinds of facilities and even tricks to bring people back to Krishna. Text number 43, famous verse. Naivo dvije paraturatya yavaitaranyas twadvirya gayana mahamrata magna chittaha shochetato vimukhachetta se indriyartha maya sukhaya bharam udvahato vimudhan. O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of material existence, for wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them. Purport. Throughout the entire world, everyone is making big plans to adjust the miseries of the material world, and this is true at present, in the past, and in the future. Nonetheless, although they make elaborate political, social, and cultural plans, they have all been described herein as vimudha, fools. The material world has been described in Bhagavad Gita as tukhalayam shashvatam, temporary and miserable, but these fools are trying to turn the material world into sukhalayam, a place of happiness, not knowing how everything acts by the arrangement of material nature, which works in her own way. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha ankara vimudhatma kartaham iti banyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. That's from Bhagavad Gita 3.27. There is a plan for material nature, personally known as Durga, to punish the demons. Although the asuras, the godless demons, struggle for existence, they are directly attacked by the goddess Durga, who is well equipped with 10 hands with different types of weapons to punish them. She is carried by her lion carrier, or the modes of passion and ignorance. Everyone struggles very hard to fight through the modes of passion and ignorance and conquer material nature, but at the end, everyone is vanquished by nature's laws. There is a river known as Vaitarani between the material and spiritual worlds, and one must cross this river to reach the other side, or the spiritual world. This is an extremely difficult task. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 7.14, Daivi hiyesha gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya. Daivi hiyesha. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. The same word duratyaya, meaning very difficult, is used here. Therefore, one cannot surpass the stringent laws of material nature except by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, although all materialists are baffled in their plans, they try again and again to become happy in this material world. Therefore, they have been described as vimudha, first-class fools. As for Prahlad Maharaj, he was not at all unhappy, for although he was in the material world, he was full of Krishna consciousness. Those who are Krishna conscious, trying to serve the Lord, are not unhappy, whereas one who has no assets in Krishna consciousness and is struggling for existence is not only foolish, but extremely unhappy also. Prahlad Maharaj was happy and unhappy simultaneously. He felt happiness and transcendental bliss because of his being Krishna conscious, yet he felt great unhappiness for the fools and rascals who make elaborate plans to be happy in this material world. Symptom of the pure devotee, paradukha dukhi. 44. Prayena deva muniyak svavimukti kama maunam charanti vijanena parartadishta Naitan vihaya kripanan vimuksha eko nanyam twadasya sharanam brahmato nupashye. My dear Lord Nrsimhadev, I see that there are many saintly persons indeed, but they are interested only in their own deliverance. Not caring for the big cities and towns, they go to the Himalayas or the forest to meditate with vows of silence, Maunavrat. They are not interested in delivering others. As for me, however, I do not wish to be liberated alone, leaving aside all these poor fools and rascals. I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot become happy. Therefore, I wish to bring them back to the shelter of your lotus feet. Purport: this is the decision of the Vaishnava, the pure devotee of the Lord. For himself, he has no problems, even if he has to stay in the material world, because his only business is to remain in Krishna consciousness. The Krishna conscious person can go even to hell and still be happy. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj said, Naivod vijay paraduratya yavaitaranya. O best of the great personalities, I'm not at all afraid of material existence. The pure devotee is never unhappy in any condition of life. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 6:17-28. Narayana parak sarve nakutaschana pipiti swarga pavarga narakeshu apitulyar tatarshanaha. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same, for such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. How is everybody? Good. For a devotee, being situated in the heavenly planets and being in the hellish planets are equal. For a devotee lives neither in heaven nor in hell, but with Krishna in the spiritual world. The secret of success for the devotee is not understood by the karmis and jnanis. Karmis therefore try to be happy by material adjustment, and jnanis want to be happy by becoming one with the Supreme. The devotee has no such interest. He is not interested in so-called meditation in the Himalayas or in the forest. Rather, his interest is in the busiest part of the world, where he teaches people Krishna consciousness. The Krishna consciousness movement was started for this purpose. We do not teach one to meditate in a secluded place just so that one may show that he has become very much advanced and may be proud of his so-called transcendental meditation, although he engages in all sorts of foolish materialistic activity. A Vaishnava like Prahlad Maharaj is not interested in such a bluff of spiritual advancement. Rather, he is interested in enlightening people in Krishna consciousness, because that is the only way for them to become happy. Prahlad Maharaj says very clearly, Nanyam twadasya sharanam brahmato nupashye. I know that without Krishna consciousness, without taking shelter of your lotus feet, one cannot become happy. One wanders within the universe life after life, but by the grace of a devotee, a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one can get the clue of Krishna consciousness and then not only become happy in this world, but also return home back to Godhead. That is the real target in life. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement are not at all interested in so-called meditation in the Himalayas or the forest, where one will only make a show of meditation. Nor are they interested in opening many schools for yoga and meditation in the cities. Rather, every member of the Krishna consciousness movement is interested in going door to door. Wow, there it is, see? Rather, every member of the Krishna consciousness movement is interested in going door to door to try to convince people about the teachings of Bhagavad Gita as it is, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. That is the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement. Well, there's the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement. I think we're on to something here. The members of the Krishna consciousness movement must be fully convinced that without Krishna one cannot be happy. Thus, the Krishna conscious person avoids all kinds of pseudo-spiritualists, transcendentalists, meditators, monists, philosophers, and transcendentalists. And philanthropists, sorry. Transcendentalists, meditators, monists, philosophers, and philanthropists. Any comment? Yes. You got a text, even without giving the number out.
This is
from Vishakha Mataji. She says, we are in Austin and we are tuned into hearing you online.
Haribo, Vishakha Lila Sundarananda.
And she's talking about the few verses which we discussed right now. So she's talking, this verse reminds me of Ramanujacharya giving out the Mula Mantra for liberation to everyone in the streets, even though his teacher, Goshti Purna, warned him not to share it with anyone else or he would go to hell for that. This shows the compassion of our Acharyas, which is the only benediction that we really have in our lives, compassion.
Sadhu, sadhu. Well put. And thanks for joining us from Austin. Beautiful. Any other points? And what's the text-in number for those others who might be watching? 650 245 7018. One more time. 650 245 7018. Our operators are standing by to take your calls. Please text in. You can call in too, can't you? That information's on the website. Star 6. Star 6 to unmute yourself. Okay, here we go. 45. Yanmai tunadi griyamedi sukham hitucham kandu yanena karayore vatukatukam tripyantinea kripana bahutukka pajaha kandu divan manasijam vishaheta dhiraha. Sex life is compared to the rubbing of two hands to relieve an itch. Griyametis, so-called grahastas, who have no spiritual knowledge, think that this itching is the greatest platform of happiness, although actually is the source of distress. The kripanas, the fools who are just the opposite of brahmanas, are not satisfied by repeated sensuous enjoyment. Those who are dhira, however, who are sober and who tolerate this itching, are not subjected to the sufferings of fools and rascals. Purport. Materialists think that sexual indulgence is the greatest happiness in this material world, and therefore they make elaborate plans to satisfy their senses, especially the genitals. This is generally found everywhere, and specifically found in the Western world, where there are regular arrangements to satisfy sex life in different ways. Actually, however, this has not made anyone happy. Even the hippies, who have given up all the materialistic comforts of their fathers and grandfathers, cannot give up the sensational happiness of sex life. Such persons are described here as kripanas, misers. The human form of life is a great asset, for in this life one can fulfill the goal of existence. Unfortunately, however, because of a lack of education and culture, people are victimized by the false happiness of sex life. Prahlad Maharaj therefore advises one not to be misled by this civilization of sense gratification, especially not by sex life. Rather, one should be sober, avoid sense gratification, and be Krishna conscious. The lusty person who is compared to a foolish miser never gets happiness by sense gratification. The influence of material nature is very difficult to surpass, but as stated by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Mameva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. If one voluntarily submits to the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be saved very easily. Wow, that's worth the price of admission. Let's hear it one more time. If one voluntarily submits to the lotus feet of Krishna, he can be saved very easily. Dear Shishi Radha Madan Mohan, Srimad Mahaprabhu, Shishi Lakshmi Nrsimhan, on this day of Nrsimhan Caturdasi, we voluntarily submit to your lotus feet. Please protect us and engage us in your service. Hare Krishna. In reference to the low-grade happiness of sex life, Jamunacharya says in this connection, Yadavari mama chetat Krishna padara vinde navanava dhamyan dutyata rantum asit tadavari bhattanari sangame smar yamane bhavati mukha vikara shushtu nishtivanam cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought and my lips curl with distaste. Jamunacharya had formerly been a great king who enjoyed sexual happiness in various ways. But since he later engaged himself in the service of the Lord, he enjoyed spiritual bliss and hated to think of sex life. If sexual thoughts came to him, he would spit with disgust. 46. Mauna vrata shutatapodhyayana swadharma bhakyara hojjapa samadhaya apavargyaha praya param purushate tvajitendriyanam varta bhavandyutana vatra tutambikanam. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, there are 10 prescribed methods on the path to liberation: to remain silent, not to speak to anyone, to observe vows, to amass all kinds of Vedic knowledge, to undergo austerities, to study the Vedas and other Vedic literatures, to execute the duties of varnashram dharma, to explain the Shastras, to stay in a solitary place, to chant mantras silently, and to be absorbed in trance. These different methods for liberation are generally only a professional practice and means of livelihood for those who have not conquered their senses. Because such persons are falsely proud, these procedures may not be successful. Purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 6.1.15, Kechit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayanaha agam dhunvanti kartsnyena niharam iva bhaskara. What a beautiful verse. Kechit kevalaya bhaktya vasudeva parayanaha agam dhunvanti kartsnyena niharam iva bhaskara. Only a rare person who has adopted complete, unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive. He can do this simply by discharging devotional service, just as the sun can immediately dissipate fog by its rays. The real purpose of human life is to attain liberation from material entanglement. Such liberation may be achieved by many methods, tapasa, brahmacharyena, shamena cha, damena cha, but all of them more or less depend on tapasya, austerity, which begins with celibacy. Shukadeva surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva Krishna automatically. Shukadeva Goswami says that those who are Vasudeva Parayana, who have fully surrendered to the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva Krishna, automatically achieve the results of mauna, silence, vrata, vows, and other such methods, simply by discharging devotional service. In other words, these methods are not so powerful. If one takes to devotional service, all of them are very easily performed. Astounding, isn't it? And encouraging. Mauna, for example, does not mean that one should just stop speaking. The tongue is meant for speaking, although sometimes, to make a big show, a person remains silent. There are many who observe silence some day in the week. Vaishnavas, however, do not observe such silence. Silence means not speaking foolishly. Speakers at assemblies, conferences, and meetings generally speak foolishly like toads. This is described by Srila Rupa Goswami as vachovegam. One who wants to say something can show himself to be a big orator, but rather than go on speaking nonsense, better to remain silent. This method of silence, therefore, is recommended for persons very attached to speaking nonsense. One who is not a devotee must speak nonsensically because he does not have the power to speak about the glories of Krishna. Thus, whatever he says is influenced by the illusory energy and is compared to the croaking of a frog. One who speaks about the glories of the Lord, however, has no need to be silent. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends Kirtaniya Sada Harihi. One should go on chanting the glories of the Lord 24 hours a day. How many hours? 24 hours. Correct. There is no question of becoming mauna or silent. The 10 processes for liberation or improvement on the path of liberation are not meant for the devotees. Kevalaya bhaktya. If one simply engages in devotional service to the Lord, all 10 methods of liberation are automatically observed. Prahlad Maharaj's proposal is that such processes may be recommended for the ajitendriya, those who cannot conquer their senses. Devotees, however, have already conquered their senses. Sarvapadiva nirmuktan tapparatvena nirmalam. A devotee is already freed from the material contamination. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore said, Dushtaman tumi kishera vaishnava prastishtar thari Nirjanera Ghare. Tava Harinam Kebala Kaitaba. There are many who like to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in a silent, solitary place, but if one is not interested in preaching, talking constantly to the non-devotees, the influence of the modes of nature is very difficult to surpass. Can you mark that place? I need that quote. This quote. There are many who like to chant the Hare Krishna mantra in a solitary place, but if one is not interested in preaching, talking constantly to the non-devotees, preaching constantly, what is it? Talking constantly to the non-devotees. The influence of the modes of nature is very difficult to surpass. Profound, isn't it? Talking constantly to the non-devotees. Yeah. Therefore, unless one is extremely advanced in Krishna consciousness, one should not imitate Haridas Thakur, who had no other business than chanting the holy names always 24 hours a day. You know, Keshav Maharaj spent a long time at Soho Street Temple, and there's a library upstairs on the 3rd floor of the Soho Street. Welcome. Of the Soho Street Temple. And the devotees would go out every day, because you could just walk, you know that Soho Street? You could just walk out onto the street and distribute books and meet people right there. So all day long the devotees would go out, and then when they'd meet somebody nice, they'd bring them up. And Keshav Maharaj would just sit there all day long. He did for 12 years. He'd just be sitting in that one room upstairs waiting, and then they'd come up, and then he would, that's why he's so expert at talking one-on-one devotees, writing letters, things like that. He's just phenomenal like that. And all day long, he would just talk to new people who just walked in. And so this is the meaning, you know, this is the way one should be engaged. As Prabhupada said, constantly talking to the non-devotees, being engaged in preaching Krishna consciousness. Good news, Ram Lakshmana Prabhu has just entered the building. Prahlad Maharaj does not condemn such a process, he accepts it. But without active service to the Lord, simply by such methods, one generally cannot attain liberation. One cannot attain liberation simply by false pride. Keep going, or do you have comments? 245-650-245 7718 7018 245-7018. That's a 650 area code. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just concentrating on the comments about going to solitary places and meditating, and devotees don't like to go there. And I was also tying that to the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam where it says, Vishaya vinivartante nirharasya dehina. So if you try to just control your senses without getting a higher taste, then the desire to enjoy those will still remain. And I was comparing that to us in the Krishna consciousness movement, like when it comes to prasadam, we enjoy it and eat it, and we openly accept it, that, you know, we eat prasadam and we enjoy it, and not artificially saying that I'm not eating this, I'm not eating that, and like that. And I was thinking that even if a person goes into a solitary place, for example, that rishi who saw the fishes, he was, how more solitary can one get? He was underneath water, right? He was completely away from human beings, inside the waters, and then he saw the two fishes and he fell down. So and contrasting that to what it's said over here, that you go there and preach.
Really nice points. And Vishwamrita Muni also meditated 10,000 years, and he didn't see Menaka, he just heard the ankle bells. And Prabhupada gives the example all the time of how Ambarish Maharaj had become so powerful because he was constantly engaging in devotional service to the Lord. And it's not necessarily our environment, it's how we're engaging. And this idea of false pride was very much something that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta preached against, that especially in India, one would get recognized very quickly if you go off to a solitary place and chant. In America, I mean, no one would care anyway. But in India, definitely you can get a status, you can get make a living out of this. Whether it's material or just out of false ego. You can become a big personality if you just show some heavy austerity. And if you go off and chant, and everyone knows, you're chanting 1 lakh of names, or 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, or something like that, then you might, in your own mind, you might entertain this idea that, okay, I'm off the grid, I'm a big devotee. And that is, basically, that kind of false pride is really nullifying your bhajan. Yes?
Prabhu, here in the Prabhupada mentioned Monvrat, however, is Vaishnava is not, follow the Monvrat. So he explained very well, how he discriminates Vaishnavas from that. Because we see in India, and as well as, some so-called sadhus, they do the Monvrat for many, many decades. And people worship. Even currently in Gilroy, in our Gilroy city, there is someone, and people go there to talk to him. And even he has a Monvrat, people go in line, stand in line a long time and get answers, he will write. So if some person says Monvrat, why you want to talk to him? And why, so many, misguiding things is there. But Prabhupada very well, discriminate Vaishnavas from that point. It's very nice.
He's writing anyway, so why not, it's communication. Yeah, people can become enamored of that so much. That was one, I remember when we were going into India in the 70s, there was one man in Vrindavan he never sat down. He had a vrat going. He stood for 10 years or more. He had a swing. He'd lean in the swing. And he'd sleep like that and everything like that, but he never sit down. And when people come, and it was a big deal, standing like that for so many years.
So Prabhuji, this verse that we read, 6.1.15, seems very promising, especially the word Prabhupada says, can uproot the weeds of sinful actions with no possibility that they will revive. But my question is, in material world, suppose my aim is to become a physician, then I become a physician, and once I become, nobody can take that title away from me. So, but in devotional service, if you want to become a pure devotee, the state of being a pure devotee doesn't seem to be a constant thing. It's at least from what we see in the material world, unless we talk about Narada Muni or someone. But the status of being a pure devotee means there is always some fear of that falling down, or losing it. So, is there that once you become pure devotee, you remain, or you should always carry this anxiety even when we become pure? How does that work?
It depends on one's level of advancement. Those who have come to what we call the safe side of devotional service, past anartha, nivritti, nishta, ruchi, they're coming more and more into the side of not falling down from the process of devotional service. Why would they? Their mind is already going in asakti. The mind is so much attached to Krishna, they can barely bring it back to the material activities. In ruchi, there's a way in which one's mind easily becomes attracted to Krishna, and when material ideas come, one can easily go back to the object, Krishna, when one has ruchi. And in asakti, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it's very difficult for the devotee to concentrate on material activities because the mind keeps running away to Krishna. Kind of the way, if you sit down and you chant japa and your mind goes somewhere else. For the devotee, it's like his mind's always running off to Krishna, and it's harder for him to concentrate on the task at hand. So this is called, when one becomes situated in these levels of Krishna consciousness. In other words, like a doctor can tell a patient, when they've come to a point when the disease is not going to come back. But at the same time, devotees who are very advanced, they'll also exhibit this caution, partly because of example, set an example for others not to toy with the material energy. And, Prabhupada said once that he was praying to not fall down, and devotees said, how that's possible? Why would you even think of that? And because, pure devotee doesn't fall down. And then Prabhupada said, that's why. Because I'm thinking like that. And earlier, Prahlad Maharaj expressed such a sentiment when he said that I'm not afraid of you, Lord Nrsimhan, but I'm afraid of your Maya, because it's so dangerous. But later on he says, I'm not affected by the material world, I'm not afraid of your Maya, because I'm always engaged in hearing and chanting about you. But if one is at a lower stage of devotional service, there's a possibility that he can revert to and exhibit worldliness at a certain point. But Rupa Goswami says in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that, Kanishta Adhikaris, their faith is weak, and that they can be affected by somebody's strong preaching, and that they'll become bewildered. But he said they come back. And he said, Madhyama Adhikari, they have strong faith, but they don't know Shastra. But he makes this point that Kanishta Adhikari, even though they may get knocked over, they still come back. Because they have that faith is something that's indelible, generally. Only offenses can sometime eclipse one's devotional service. Prabhupada mentions this in the Nectar of Devotion, that according to the severity of the offense, one's shining devotional service becomes eclipsed, and one loses the ability to carry on in devotional service temporarily until that is rectified. And it will be rectified at some point, and one's the progress one has made will then come back when the offense becomes rectified at a certain point. But that's why we emphasize so much when we're learning Sambandha Gyan to avoid offenses. Avoid offenses, and we don't want to make Nam Aparads. We don't want to make Seva Aparads. We don't want to make Vaishnava Aparads. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jadi Vaishnava Aparadi Uti Hati Mata Uparivachinde Tar Shuki Ayapata. He said that this plant that's growing, the creeper of devotional service, it can be trampled and broken and dry up and be seriously injured because of Vaishnava Aparadha. And so we're cultivating these things. Careful, careful, careful. We have to be humble and careful. Carefulness is something you should study and look into, what is it? Prabhupada talks about, he quotes the verse a lot about how spiritual life is like a razor's edge. If you're inattentive, then when you're shaving with a sharp razor, you can slip and cut yourself. So this can happen if you're not careful. So you have to engage in devotional service, and you have to be careful. Not being careful means you become overconfident and think that I'm okay. I can do this now because I'm so advanced. That's why you have to be humble and careful. Humility helps you to be careful, because if you're very humble, you'll think, I can't do that. Other people might do it, but I can't do it. That person's more advanced than me. They can do that. I can't do that. I can't go there. I can't look at that. I can't entertain these things because I'm not so advanced. We should think like that. That's what protects us. But when there's a attachment to Krishna, there's not that issue is not there, unless, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes this verse that if one exposes oneself to Mayavad philosophy, he said even a Mahabhagavat can fall down. Mostly for emphasis, because the Mahabhagavat's not going to be interested in hearing Mayavad philosophy anyway. But in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada talks about how the advanced devotee can like he said, a spiritual master can, a bona fide spiritual master who accepts disciples for who are vishayis, who are enjoyers, who are actually interested in the path of devotional service, and he might associate with them in the wrong way, or think that, well, maybe I'll get something out of it. They can fall down because of that. And Prabhupada then says, but a bona fide spiritual master won't accept a Vishayi disciple. But then he said, but even if he does, his devotional service can be hampered by that. A dentist, I mean, they can lose their position, can't they? I've heard of dentists being, losing their license and. Yeah, you know about a dentist lost his license. Oh, microphone? Any of them working? Yeah.
Like they did their MBBS in India, but now when they came to USA, there is no validity. They can't work here. They're all tied
no
to
can
business.
do. Can't help you.
I was thinking about the same similar comment. And my brother is a surgeon, and he was educated in India. And one of the reasons he never came to America was that he said that the patients sue you at the drop of a pinhead. He was very, very scared of that. And
in America?
Yeah, as compared to India. Yeah, so he said over here the doctors are so heavily insured also against malpractices, suits and things like that. So I don't know whether it's comforting or not, but it's equally rare.
Harava bhaktasa kuto mahadguna manoriti nasati davatobahi. Bhagavatam says, so what if someone makes advancement in material life? It's like big yawn, big deal. It doesn't last. Whatever accomplishment you got, tasyaiva hetu prayateta kovido na labhyate yad brahmatam upariyada. You may attain something, but it's just going to be lost in due course of time. No real consequence. But devotional service, even if you do a little bit and fall down, says Narada Muni, Tyaktva sadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajana pakvo tapatet toyadi. If you gave up your dentistry idea, you quit school, much to the chagrin of your parents, Tyaktva sadharmam, you gave up your dharma of being a family dentist. Charanam bhujam harer, to take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Bhajana pakvota patet tadoyadi. But you were apakva. You didn't really think it over that carefully, and you weren't ripe. You weren't to that. You weren't very advanced in devotional service. You were apakva, and therefore patet, you fall down. Even if that happens, Narada Muni says, no problem, because at least you got that advancement. You eternally gained from that. On the other hand, he says, but if you perfectly perform your dharma and become the best dentist in the world, what did you get? It'll be lost, all lost. This is the bigger vision. Our little spot life we're passing through, it seems so consequential in so many things. But, Prabhupada, even in the midst of the wild 70s when people were criticizing book distribution for so many reasons, they're saying, you guys are too wild. We were wild, so what? I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like we were way too wild. But Prabhupada didn't see it like that so much. He was seeing the part where people were getting benediction, eternal benediction when they got the books. And now we've tamed our wild ways, and it's going on as well. But his vision, I always remarked at that, how he saw the eternal benefit people were giving, much bigger picture. And now we see that people who got books in their last life are being born into devotee families. I mean, we see, when I say we see, we're seeing through Shastra. But it's a fact. I mean, people are being born, they got a book, and then they got some benefit. Where are they going to go? To continue reading the book. They're born into it, and then they have a little grain ceremony. They say, hey, you want the book? And it's like, I just did that a few minutes ago. And then they go for it again.
I had a question. This is related to the Vaishnava Aparadh. So, does it depend on the other Vaishnava whom you are dealing with? Suppose some person can take offense too easily, somebody is, he doesn't mind. So, does it depend on his nature also? His or her? Or is it like, whatever, if I do something, behave wrongly, so anyway it's an offense. So.
Well, generally, a Vaishnav is very forgiving. Most of the time, you'll find that Vaishnavs they don't accept an offense. It's just that Krishna does, and he doesn't like and what's really required for an offense against a Vaishnava is some kind of malice, that you're actually envious of the person, and you express that in a way that is offensive. And it comes out, and it bothers everybody around the Vaishnava, and it bothers Krishna. But generally the Vaishnava says, it's okay, no problem. Like Haridas Thakur, when he was in that assembly with Gopal Chapala, who was this very haughty Brahmin in the employ of these educated Brahmins. They were having a discussion about the holy name, and then someone asked Haridas Thakur to speak about it. And he said that just by chanting the holy name, one easily gets liberation. That comes as a concomitant. And this employee of these Brahmins, who was also a Brahmin educated person, he criticized Haridas out of a kind of an envy, and saying that, how can you say that? That who do you think you are? That was his mood, Who are you to say? What do you know? I'm a Brahmin, you don't know anything. There's malice. There was malice in him. And he said, so if you're wrong about that, then I'll cut your nose off. And Haridas Thakur just accepted it. He said, hey, if I'm wrong, I'll cut my own nose off. But he didn't take offense, but everybody else did. And those Brahmins fired him immediately, that haughty Brahmin. They said, go away from here. And that was an offense, and he got the reaction very quickly afterwards. He got some leprosy, his nose fell off. So anyway, if a person's very sensitive, generally, Vaishnavas, they have different temperaments, sometimes. But they're not unforgiving. It's a quality of a Vaishnava to be very forgiving. Yeah.
So I was just elaborating on the comment that you made, that people get the book in this life, and then the next life they're born in a family, in a devotee family. Meenakshi, who had come and met you the day that the temple opened here, she's from my office, and she was just casually telling me yesterday that her manager, who is an American, she keeps all sorts of things, and there was a Krishna in her cube, just like that she keeps, to increase the vibration. And so she had asked her, get me something which is going to improve the vibration. So I said, hey, give her the Bhagavad Gita. So she gave her the Bhagavad Gita yesterday.
Oh, nice.
So I was just thinking, wow, she's going to be born into a devotee family.
Yeah. I like how people are coming from all over the place to see Lord Nrsimhadev today. There's people coming in for darshan. Or is this every day like this? Gaur Premanande, Lord Nrsimhadev ki jai, Hare Krishna. Yeah, very popular.
And I think it's also location.
Yeah.
For this, I on every Friday, every Saturday and Sundays I see so many new faces, and sometimes I even comment that I sometimes feel very lost because there are so many new faces.
New people.
As compared to this, but
Nice.
that's a good thing. And one of them was very, very happy. She told me on Saturday that I'm so happy that Lord Krishna came near me. And wow, it's a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Even on other when there are no programs, still there are more visitors than previously.
I see. Now, are both microphones working or not? Okay, give one to them over there, because it's better than that wacky little thing. Okay, here we go. Rupe ime sadasati asatita vaveda shushte Bijankarav inatachanyara rupakasya yukta samaksham upayatra vichangshante tvam yogina vanmivadarushunanyata syad. By authorized Vedic knowledge, one can see that the forms of cause and effect in the material cosmic manifestation belong to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For the cosmic manifestation is His energy. Both cause and effect are nothing but energies of the Lord. Therefore, O my Lord, just as a wise man, by considering cause and effect, can see how fire pervades wood, those engaged in devotional service understand how you are both the cause and the effect. Purport: as described in previous verses, many so-called students of spiritual understanding follow the 10 different methods known as Mauna Vrat, Shuta Tapo, Dhyayana Swadharma, Vyakya Raho Japa Samadayaha. These may be very attractive, but by following such methods, one cannot actually understand the real cause and effect of the original cause of everything, Janmadhyasa Yataha. The original source of everything is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, Sarva Karana Karanam. This original source of everything is Krishna, the Supreme Ruler. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sakchidananda Vigraha. He has His eternal spiritual form. Indeed, He is the root of everything, Bijamam Sarva Bhutanam. Whatever manifestations exist, their cause is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This cannot be understood by so-called silence or by any other hodgepodge method. The Supreme Cause can be understood only by devotional service. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktyamam abhichanati. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:14-21, the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Bhaktyaham ekaya graya. One can understand the original cause of all causes, the Supreme Person, only by devotional service, not by show bottle exhibitionism. The show bottle, Prabhupada explains that in the pharmacist, they'll have a big bottle, what represents a bottle of medicine, and then they'll put dye in it, like food coloring, so it'll be red, like the medicine would be red, and then they put it in the window. But it actually has no potency. There's nothing in it. It's just for show. They do that in Japan, too. In every restaurant in Japan, in the window, they have the exact replica. It's an amazing science, an exact replica of all the menu items that you can get inside. They make them out of some kind of plastic, but it looks absolutely real. So they have the plates actually in the window, and it shows what is available on every menu, but none of them are edible. They're just simply for show. So one can understand how the Lord pervades everything just as fire is within wood when one engages in devotional service. 48. Tvam vayuragni ravanir viradambumatra pranindriyani hridayam chidanugrahascha sarvam tvameva saguna vigunascha bhuman nanyat twadastyapi mano vachasa niruktam. O Supreme Lord, you are actually the air, the earth, fire, sky, and water. You are the objects of sense perception, the life airs, the 5 senses, the mind, consciousness, and false ego. Indeed, you are everything, subtle and gross. The material elements and anything expressed, either by the words or the mind, are nothing but you. Purport: this is the all-pervasive conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which explains how He spreads everywhere and anywhere. Sarvam Kalavidam Brahma. Everything is Brahman, the Supreme Brahman, Krishna. Nothing exists without Him, as the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 9:4. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagadavyakta murtina mastani sarva bhutani na chaham teshvavastitaha. I exist everywhere, and everything exists in me, yet I am not visible everywhere. The Lord can be visible only through devotional service. Tatra tishtami narada yatra gayanti madbhakta. The Supreme Lord stays only where His devotees chant His glories. 49. Naite gunana gunino maharada yo ye sarve mana prapritaya sahadeva martya adyantavanta urgaya vidanti hi tvam evam vimrishya sudiyo viramanti shabdad. Neither the 3 modes of material nature, Sattva-gun, Rajagun, and Tamagun, nor the predominating deities controlling these 3 modes, nor the 5 gross elements, nor the mind, nor the demigods, nor the human beings can understand your lordship, for they are all subjected to birth and annihilation. Considering this, the spiritually advanced have taken to devotional service. Such wise men hardly bother with Vedic study. Instead, they engage themselves in practical devotional service. Purport. As stated in several places, Bhaktyamama Vijanati, only by devotional service can the Supreme Lord be understood. The intelligent person, the devotee, does not bother much about the practices mentioned in text 46, Mauna Vrat Shruta Tapo Dhyayana Swadharma. After understanding the Supreme Lord through devotional service, such devotees are no longer interested in the study of the Vedas. Indeed, this is confirmed in the Vedas also. The Vedas say, Kim artha vayam advaishyamahe, kim artha vayam vakshamahe. What is the use of studying so many Vedic literatures? What is the use of explaining them in different ways? Vayam vakshyamahe. No one needs to study any more Vedic literatures, nor does anyone need to describe them by philosophical speculation. Bhagavad Gita 2.52 also says, Yada te mohakalilam buddhir vyati tarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shutasya. When one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead by executing devotional service, one ceases the practice of studying the Vedic literature. Elsewhere it is said, Aradito yadi haris tapasata kim. If one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in His service, there is no more need of severe austerities, penances, and so on. However, if after performing severe austerities and penances, one does not understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such practices are useless. Here we go. This is the last of Prahlad Maharaj's prayers. Are you ready? Yes. We're coming to the end of the whole section. This is thrilling, isn't it? It's like there's nothing as satisfying as performing a yajna, bona fide yajna. It fortifies one in all ways, and the results are permanent, unlike dentistry. Ter hatama namastuti karma puja karma smritish charanayo shravana. Okay, karma smritish charanayo shravanam katayam samsevaya tvai vineti shadangayakim bhaktim jana paramahamsa katao lapeta. Hare Krishna. Therefore, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, the best of all persons to whom prayers are offered, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, because without rendering 6 kinds of devotional service unto you, offering prayers, dedicating all the results of one's activities, worshiping you, working on your behalf, always remembering your lotus feet, and hearing about your glories, who can achieve that which is meant for the Paramahamsas? Purport, the Vedas enjoin, Nayamatma pravachanena labhyo namedayana bahuna shutena. One cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by studying the Vedas and offering prayers. Only by the grace of the Supreme Lord can one understand Him. The process of understanding the Lord, therefore, is bhakti. Without bhakti, simply following the Vedic injunctions to understand the absolute truth will not be helpful at all. The process of bhakti is understood by the Paramahamsa, one who has accepted the essence of everything. The results of bhakti are reserved for such a Paramahamsa, and this stage cannot be obtained by any Vedic process other than devotional service. Other processes such as jnana and yoga can be successful only when mixed with bhakti. When we speak of jnana yoga, karma yoga, and dhyana yoga, the word yoga indicates bhakti. Bhakti yoga or putti yoga, executed with intelligence and full knowledge, is the only successful method for going back home, back to Godhead. If one wants to be liberated from the pangs of material existence, he should take to devotional service for the quick attainment of this goal. How many minutes is there? It's 5 more minutes till Artik, right? Well, we have time for Gayatri. We just finished Prahlad's prayers. And we have a couple more verses at the end of this chapter, and then there's one more chapter called Prahlad, the Best Among Exalted Devotees. Gayatri. Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman. Hey, Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman, Nachariyar marman.